Chapter 613. Yang Chonggui and his parents arrived in Jiangqing at around 8 in the evening. However, their clothes, including Yang Qing and his wife's, still looked out of place even though they were wearing the new clothes they bought for the spring festival. Walking in the station, they still attracted a lot of attention, especially the 2 sacks of local specialties that Yang Qing was carrying. He looked like a country bumpkin entering the city. Passers-by avoided him in fear of bumping into him. Unfortunately, the passers-by didn't follow them to the end. Otherwise, they would have been shocked to see the country bumpkin in a Humvee SUV that was worth millions. Ignoring the gazes of others, after waiting for a long time, they finally received their parents safely. Yang Yi breathed a sigh of relief. As soon as he came up, he directly grabbed their luggage, even his sister-in-law's. He and Yang Qing took on the heavy responsibility. Seeing Yang Yi's filial behavior, Yang Chonggui didn't say anything. He was very satisfied, but he snorted reservedly. "Have you guys eaten dinner?" Yang Yi was worried that it would be too late, and everyone would still be hungry. After all, it was more than an hour's drive to go home from the Binhai district station. In the car, Qing bought some food. "We ate at around 5. Dong Yu saw her son, and was in a good mood. She smiled and said, "Don't worry, we're not hungry now. Then let's go home and rest first." While chatting, Yang Yi brought them to the place where he parked his car. "Brother, you changed your car again?" Yang Qing was surprised to see Yang Yi's new favorite. Yang Yi could be considered a car owner now. When he got married, Yang Qing gave him a new car as a wedding gift. However, this domineering Humvee with its huge and muscular body was definitely the favorite of men who worshipped strength. Yang Qing couldn't help but touch it. Yang Yi was busy putting the luggage in the trunk. He casually replied, "Yes, the previous car was a bit conspicuous and easy to recognize. You also know your sister-in-law's identity, so you bought another car. There are spare ones in the garage. You guys also need cars in Jiangqing. You can pick one to drive." "Brother, I think this car is too fierce. It looks like a tank." Yang Qing clicked his tongue in wonder. "Like a tank?" Speaking of this, the silent Yang Chonggui couldn't help but sneer and mock. "Qing, you haven't seen a tank before. Let me tell you, if I drive a tank here and collide with Tai Zi's car, I can easily flatten it." Yang Qing didn't dare to talk back. It was only when they got into the car that he couldn't help but whisper to Yang Yi, "You make it sound like he has driven a tank before." Yang Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry at Yang Qing's ridicule. He thought to himself, "Isn't it as if it's real? The old man might have really driven it before, although it might be an antique tank to us." Of course, he wouldn't tell Yang Qing about this. Compared to the bumpy ride of Tyrant, the Humvee was much more stable. On the way home, the tired Zheng Shuyi leaned against Yang Qing and dozed off. Yang Yi, on the other hand, chatted with Yang Chonggui, who was in the front passenger seat, and his mother, who was in the back seat. They talked about their current situation and Yang Huan's learning situation. "Dad, what do you think is different about the city now compared to the city you were in back then?" Yang Yi asked vaguely when he saw Yang Chonggui looking out of the car window. "There are more cars, more people, more buildings, and more impetuous," Yang Chonggui said slowly after a while. "Concise and comprehensive." "That's true. After all, times are changing." Yang Yi didn't know how to continue talking to his father. Both of them didn't like to chat, so he could only sigh softly. "Tai Zi, where is Huan staying now? Is she still staying at your place?" Dong Yue had a lot of things she was concerned about, and wanted to ask Yang Yi. "She usually stays at school. I have a house over there. I let her stay there now so that it's convenient for her to go to school," Yang Yi said with a smile. "But aren't you here today? Huan will stay at my place for 2 days. She's also staying at home to accompany Murphy. She'll go back to school after you settle down. Her studies are more important. Let her go back quickly," Dong Yue said with a frown. "It's okay. It's just a day or 2. She can go back to school during the day." An hour passed quickly as they chatted like this. Finally, Yang Yi and the rest arrived at the villa. Although they knew that Yang Yi and the rest lived in a villa and couldn't see clearly at night, they still couldn't help but gawk when they arrived home. The villa's luxury seemed to be a little beyond their imagination. "Brother Tai Zi, does this entire courtyard belong to you?" Zheng Shuyi couldn't help but ask in the car. If that was the case, then it was a little too exaggerated. Even the richest family in Zheng village didn't have a courtyard as big as this. The lawn was so wide that it could be plowed and used to grow vegetables. They could be self-sufficient with their daily vegetables. Yeah. What do you think? Is it okay? Yang Yi stopped the car and pulled the handbrake. He asked with a smile. It's beautiful. Before they could finish their thoughts, Murphy and Yang Huan had already come out of the door. Maybe it was because steamed buns smelled the strangers, but he had already run out and was circling around the car. Of course, when Yang Yi got out of the car, he still wagged his tail, but he didn't let down his guard. This is the dog that Dabo's family brought back, right? He's already so big. Yang Yi said to Yang Yi, Steamed Bun, he's one of us. Don't offend him. Yang Yi glared at Steamed Bun. As if he understood Yang Yi's words, Steamed Bun's gaze softened. He wagged his tail briskly and went over to sniff the newcomers one by one. However, no one had the time to pay attention to him. Dad, Mom, you must be tired from the car ride. Before Murphy could finish her greeting, Dong Yuera looked at her pregnant daughter-in-law and said with a smile, It's okay, it's okay. Hurry back to the house. It's cold outside. Don't catch a cold. She even pulled Murphy affectionately and urged her to enter the house without any explanation. Yang Huan, who was next to them, was pitifully left out. Where's little Yang Shi? Yang Chonggui frowned when he realized that his precious granddaughter wasn't around. Yang Huan quickly explained, She was waiting for you guys to come back, but she was too sleepy and fell asleep half an hour ago. It was already 10 o'clock. She usually went to bed at 9 o'clock. She stayed up until 9:30 and couldn't hold on any longer. It was indeed too late. Yang Yi and the others had been on the train for a whole day and were tired. Yang Yi settled them down and took a shower. Everyone went to bed early. The next day when Yang Yi came back from his run, Yang Chonggui was already up. The old man had been unhindered by wind and rain for decades, and today was the same. Early in the morning, he started practicing in the courtyard. Yang Qing did not dare to slack off, and followed him to practice. Yang Yi only went for a run. Yang Chonggui wasn't satisfied with Yang Yi's exercise, so he called Yang Yi over to spar with Yang Qing. The yard was lively. She finally got up. Murphy dressed her, and the little girl couldn't wait to run downstairs. Grandpa! Cece's clear and melodious voice could be heard from afar. Yang Chonggui turned his head, and saw a little girl with a bright smile running out of the villa under the bright sunshine of the winter morning. The old man's wrinkled face couldn't be serious anymore, and a smile bloomed on his face. Little Yang Shi, you're awake too. Yang Chonggui picked up the little girl lovingly and said, You've grown up and gained a lot of weight. Grandpa, I was waiting for you last night, but I didn't see Papa's car. Then, I don't know how I fell asleep. She hugged her grandpa's neck and said with a pout. It seemed that she cared more. She could have seen her grandpa yesterday. It's okay. Grandpa knows. Yang Chonggui nodded happily. Grandpa, do you miss me? After the little girl expressed that she missed her grandpa, she blinked her big eyes and asked expectantly. Yes, of course. Yang Chonggui couldn't stop smiling. He, who was usually rigid and prideful, was like a different person. Grandpa, you didn't even come to see me. In the morning, Cece's chatter was the prelude to a happy and blissful day. In underscore Norini underscore per underscore I underscore P. In underscore Norini underscore co underscore RA. Finally, Yang Yi's so-called unconscious singing began. The bass singers who were still sober looked down at the lyrics in their hands, and found that it was indeed pronounced like that. However, it didn't seem to be completely according to the lyrics. The boundary between vowels and consonants, between musical notes, seemed to have been broken. Accompanied by the original melody, this song suddenly became vigorous and tragic. It contained strong emotions that made it difficult for people to control themselves, and they almost shed tears. It could be that they were moved, or it could be that they were in awe. Now no one dared to look down on this young lad in front of them. Although he was only in his 30s, his work, I have to say, your work is wonderful. It's very, very good. I'm sorry, I can't think of a better adjective to describe the shock in my heart. We even thought that our doubts were funny. I'm very sorry. After singing, the choir leader expressed his sincerest apologies to Yang Yi, who had just walked out of the recording studio. Let's not talk about this. Let's work together to make this music that can shock people. I need your help, the help of all the bass singers. Your voices are the soul of this song. Yang Yi smiled casually. It's an honor to participate in the recording of this work, the leader of the choir said with a flushed face. He turned to look at his members and said, all of you buck up and learn. You can't just do your best. You must do your best, the best. It wasn't easy to get a dozen people to correct their pronunciation accurately, then let them make themselves vague, and then let them all sing together as if they were singing as one. This wasn't a simple task. Even though the members of the choir had worked together many times and had a certain degree of tacit understanding, when they were in the recording studio, each one of them wore soundproof headphones and sang around the microphone. The monitoring headphones outside were able to detect the minute differences in their voices. Singing on the stage, this slight difference could be tolerated, but when it was recorded for people to listen to alone, this difference was a flaw. After repeated efforts, the recording of this music took Yang Yi and the bass singers 3 days, but in the end, they recorded a version that Yang Yi was satisfied with. What was left was the final music production. Yang Yi also had a special recording studio at home, so he could continue to work at home. Of course, Yang Yi didn't come to the company just to work on this work. He also talked to Mo Xiaowan about the auction of China Star Production. Yang Yi gave Mo Xiaowan the maximum capital of 260 million yuan, and asked her and Xiao AI to attend the bank auction at the end of this month. This money was all the money Yang Yi had left after deducting the money to buy the land for Lan's Hao Kai. After buying China Star Production and selling the assets of the original TV series project, he could still get some liquidity for Sahara Publishing House. Otherwise, he could only wait for his copyright income next month. If 260 million yuan still couldn't buy China Star Production, Yang Yi had no choice but to use the backup plan and ask Mo Xiaowan to poach people. But then he might not be able to gather a production team. Yang Yi didn't want to show himself because his goal was too obvious. Yang Yi didn't want this variety show production company to be marked by the reporters from the beginning. Plus, this money was indeed a lot. If the entertainment reporters knew that a small songwriter and best-selling author had 260 million yuan, they would definitely not be tired of digging up his background. In addition to financial support, Yang Yi also transferred his own negotiation team from Sahara Publishing House for Mo Xiaowan to use. These people could help Mo Xiaowan in legal consultation, information investigation, business strategy, or some small tricks. It was worth mentioning that during this period, Yang Yi also received a phone call from Zhu Jie. Punishment of Impulsiveness had been released for less than 5 days, and Zhu Jie had already reached the top of the new best-selling song list. Its results were amazing, exceeding the data of the third place by almost half. Presumably, it would continue to dominate the first place for a long time. That's right, the second place that was not mentioned was Yang Yi and Murphy's Today You Will Marry Me, because this song would soon pass the new song deadline and be removed from the list. But it had to be said that Punishment of Impulsiveness had indeed surpassed it and started Zhu Jie's dynasty. Yang Yi didn't care about this. Zhu Jie didn't call to show off. He wanted to thank Yang Yi. Mistress and That Night both rushed into the top 10, but there was no hope of reaching the top. Zhu Jie had been looking forward to it for so long, and he could finally achieve his own breakthrough. He was about to cry with joy. Those bullshit experts said that it was impossible for me to sing this kind of song, but I wanted to prove to them that I succeeded. Thank you, boss. Without your help, I, Zhu Jie, would still be a third-rate artist who was laughed at by others. I can finally slap their faces. Zhu Jie was so excited that he was incoherent. It's just a small achievement, and you're already so full of yourself? Yang Yi smiled and poured cold water on Zhu Jie. Chapter 6:15. Zhu Jie was different from other people. This playboy only wanted to be a big star. His thoughts were as simple as a pig who only wanted to eat, drink, and sleep well. If his dream was realized, he would lose his next goal and become lost. He would probably be like a headless fly, bumping around randomly. Zhu Jie, who was in a state of excitement, might not have realized this, but he would eventually reach the crossroads. So Yang Yi wanted to pour cold water on him. Don't forget, your singing is still very average. The reason why impulsive punishment was successful. Zhu Jie thought that Yang Yi had misunderstood. He hurriedly said, I know it's all because you wrote this song. It's too good. No, the song is only part of the reason. The other part is because I taught you how to sing. Yang Yi said to Zhu Jie. This kind of singing is something that no one in the music industry has ever tried before. Everyone is so passionate about it because it's new. Zhu Jie was not stupid. He quickly understood what Yang Yi meant. His hoarse singing voice, coupled with the constant high notes that appeared in the song, made the song so charming. Not to mention the fans, even Zhu Jie's own songs, after being tuned by the producer, were nearly touched by the vicissitudes of life that he had experienced when he listened to them. Yang Yi continued, but you have to understand that your singing is not good. Your voice is not very distinctive. Plus, after this song becomes famous, there will definitely be many people imitating your singing. Copycat. Zhu Jie blurted out. Yes, copycat. Yang Yi said. If there are too many copycats, your singing will cause fans to feel tired. Maybe impulsive punishment will be popular for a month or two, but what about after that? Your popularity will drop step by step. The experts who were slapped in the face by you will jump out again and laugh at you for being a flash in the pan and not a big star at all. Zhu Jie trembled, as if he felt the fear of falling from a high altar. As Yang Yi peeled off the beautiful new clothes bit by bit, Zhu Jie realized that he hadn't changed much from before. He was only temporarily enveloped by a halo, but this halo could dissipate at any time. Do you know why Chen Yijie has only sung 2 of my songs, but his starlight has never faded? Yang Yi asked. Because he has other classic songs of his own? Zhu Jie asked in confusion. No, it's because he has excellent singing skills. Even if you remove all his songs, he can still use his singing skills to sing other songs to move people's hearts. Yang Yi said. Murphy is the same. Do you think she will sing my songs better? No, the classic songs of other singers, Mo Fei can sing them just as well. She can even sing better than them. Then what should I do? Zhu Jie asked in confusion. I can't sing as well as Chen Yijie and Sister Murphy. Your singing skills can only be honed slowly, but if you want to continue being a superstar, you have to tap into your other potential. Or rather, what you're already very good at. Yang Yi paused. Zhu Jie blurted out, variety ability? Many seniors have said that I have a strong sense of artistry. That's right. Yang Yi smiled and said, it's variety ability. I've seen some of your variety shows and your performance is very outstanding. Even if you're not the host or the main guest, your entertainment ability is very strong. Then what should I do? Zhu Jie was excited, as if he had found a new goal to strive for. Don't worry now. You can continue to hit the charts. Punishment of impulsiveness can still be popular for a while. I hope you can continue to occupy the top of the new best-selling chart. Yang Yi said, I will have some new arrangements in this area. When we are ready, when my program is ready, I will invite you to come and help. Yang Yi emphasized the word help. Because Yang Yi understood that this time, he was no longer cultivating Zhu Jie one-sidedly, but he also needed Zhu Jie's variety ability. Don't worry. Boss Yang, you've helped me so much. It's time for me to help you. Zhu Jie said indifferently. Yang Yi smiled and said, I won't let you help me for free. This will be a very popular and fun variety show. It can keep your popularity at the forefront of A-list stars for at least 5 or 6 years. I hope this will be a win-win cooperation. Boss, I can't wait to see it. Zhu Jie rubbed his hands and said excitedly. When Yang Yi was recording in the studio and training Zhu Jie, he didn't spend much time with his family, only during the first day of their arrival. However, they didn't need Yang Yi's company. Dong Yue was looking forward to the birth of her grandson. When she arrived in Jiang City, except for the second day when Yang Yi strongly urged her to go shopping with him, she was always around Murphy, asking her how she was doing. How could she bear to leave the house? Yang Qing and Zheng Shuyi were similar to Yang Huan. When they went shopping that day, They saw the amazing prices, so they refused to go shopping. In addition, Mo Fei inadvertently revealed that she wanted to plant some flowers in the yard, so the young couple was ordered by Dong Yu to dig up a piece of grass that had already withered in winter in the yard and put some fresh silt near the stream in the back of Ting Mountain. When the spring came next year, they could sow the seeds of the flowers. Living in a villa allowed them to live in a rural area. Yang Yi didn't care about it. As long as his family was happy, it was fine. Young Chongui didn't want to wander around. He said, "I've walked more roads than you have eaten rice. What's there to see outside? It's better to stay at home with my granddaughter." When Yang Yi was still busy recording, the weekend came. She didn't need to go to kindergarten in the day, so Grandpa Yang was happy to be their nanny. And he was the nanny of the two little girls. Grandpa Yang. Lan Xian went to Wadayaka village during Yang Yi and Murphy's wedding. She saw Yang Chongui, so she came to Shishi's house to play. The little girl called him sweetly. "Haha, little Lan Xian is very good." Yang Chongui smiled until the wrinkles on his face almost disappeared. He patted Lan Xian's little head gently. "Grandpa, Xian Air is my best friend." She didn't care whether Grandpa Yang knew her or not. She introduced her to him enthusiastically. She also remembered something that she didn't tell Grandpa Yang. She said happily, And I have a good friend. She's a foreigner." Yang Chonggui's smile froze. "A foreigner? Which country is she from?" Lan Xian didn't want to be left out. She said excitedly, I know. She's Swedish. My dad said she's in Europe. I've been to Europe. Lu Weisha is Swedish, but I've never been there. I don't know where she is." She sighed regretfully. "Swedish." Yang Chonggui's smile returned. He breathed a sigh of relief and said, "It's good that she's not from Japan." "Where is Japan?" She asked, blinking her big eyes in confusion. I know. Lan Xian answered happily again. "Japan is very close to us. I've been there with my dad, but he said that the people there aren't good. He doesn't like them." "Yes. Little Lan Xian is right. Little Shishi, you have to remember that we can't make friends with the people from Japan." Yang Chonggui bent down and pressed on Shishi's shoulder as he said seriously. "But I only have one foreigner friend, Lu Weisha." Shishi said doubtfully. "It's okay. Just remember it." Yang Chonggui seemed to have realized that he seemed to have given his child too much of a heavy historical burden. He stopped there and put on a kind smile. "Little Lan Xian, come here. What are you going to play with, little Lan Xian?" "I want to play with dolls with Shishi," Lan Xian said excitedly. Yes. Shishi also smiled. The profound words of the adults didn't affect the little girl. It was fine if she didn't understand. She giggled. "I want to play with dolls with Xian Air. There are so many dolls. There's Papa, Mom, a baby, and a big bad wolf." Was this a fairy tale version of playing house? Chapter 6:16. Yang Chonggui and Yang Yi's attitude towards Cici was still a little different. The old man doted on his granddaughter. They were playing house upstairs, but when Shishi said that she wanted to play in the living room, a bigger place, the old man came down with a big box containing Shishi's dolls and other toys. Then, Yang Chonggui sat on the sofa and smiled as he watched the two girls arrange the troops. "This is Mom, this is Papa." Shishi took out the dolls from the box. "I want to be a mother." Lan Xian leaned over and shouted as she threw herself on the dolls. "Why?" Shishi was a little unhappy. She also liked the dolls. Because you were a mother last time. It's my turn to be a mother," Lan Xian said. Shishi thought for a while, and reluctantly accepted this reason. "Okay, then I'll be Papa. I can cook. But I want to be the older sister, and you'll be the younger brother." Yang Chonggui didn't know what they were talking about. Anyway, it was very interesting to watch the two girls play. Big Bear is good. It won't do bad things. And this big bad wolf is bad. Finally, after being busy for a while, Shishi finished setting up the house. The little girl was quite satisfied. She put the panda dolls next to her, which made her feel safe. More than a dozen dolls had their own roles. Lan Xian was busy naming them, but they were all based on the color of the dolls. The big bad wolf is called Big Bad Wolf. Lon Xian pointed at the husky pillow that was recognized as the Big Bad Wolf. The Big Bad Wolf was leaning against the leg of the coffee table, and on the other side of the coffee table was a terrifying primitive forest. Haha, Big Bad Wolf, I thought Little Bad Wolf was Little Bad Wolf. Shishi's imagination was rich, and she suddenly laughed. Maybe it heard its name, Little Bad Wolf, who was lying comfortably on the carpet in front of the floor-to-ceiling window in the living room, turned its head and looked at its little master in confusion. Could it be that they were going to feed him? However, Little Gray only meowed and lazily swung its tail to the other side. It had no intention of coming over. Humph, I won't be fooled if I can't see the dried fish. However, Little Gray's movements made Lon Xian look over. Her eyes lit up as she said, Shishi, can we let Little Gray play too? It can be a big tiger, but big tigers are also bad guys. They're even worse than big bad wolves. I've seen them on TV before. They're super powerful. Shishi was a little moved by Lon Xian's words, and Lon Xian's words also evoked her memories. The little girl beamed with joy and said, I know the big tiger. I saw it in the zoo with Papa and Brother Yamba, but Brother Yamba didn't play with me. This time, Shishi did not stray too far from the topic. She also agreed to add a villain. She was a little tired of always playing the big bad wolf. However, Little Gray ignored Shishi, who was eagerly inviting it to join. The two little girls had to get up and pull Little Gray away. However, when it saw Lon Xian, the big devil, walking towards it, Little Gray, who had a psychological trauma, shivered and hurriedly got up and slipped onto its own cat tree. Oh, Little Gray doesn't want to play with us anymore. Shishi looked at Little Gray's big round face, pouted her small mouth, and said a little sadly. Young Chongui, who was watching from the side, saw his granddaughter's aggrieved look and was immediately unhappy. Whoa. It's just a domestic cat. How dare it embarrass my granddaughter? The old man stood up from the sofa and valiantly said, Little Yangshi, watch Grandpa. Grandpa will help you catch it to play with you. Young Chonggui's appearance immediately made Little Gray smell a sense of danger. It stared closely at young Chongui. Seeing him walk closer step by step, it felt more and more uneasy. It hurriedly jumped and wanted to slip away. This was the cat's territory, at least in the eyes of Little Gray and the others. Little Gray and Little Well-Behaved often used their strong skills to tease the clumsy big dog Steamed Bun. However, Little Gray was destined to suffer a tragedy today. Young Chongui was old but strong. His eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. When Little Gray jumped up, he suddenly stretched out his hands and caught Little Gray in midair. Grandpa is so amazing. Shishi looked at her grandpa's brave performance and couldn't help but hold her small hands. Her two big eyes sparkled as she looked at her grandpa. Too amazing. Lon Xian was also full of worship. Young Chongui was being worshipped by his granddaughter. He grabbed the screaming Little Gray and felt as if he had hit a big tiger. The old man and the young man madly shook their eyebrows at Shishi. At the door, Steamed Bun, who was happily playing in the grass, happened to see the scene of Little Gray screaming. There was actually someone who could defeat the great demon king Little Gray? In Steamed Bun's heart, Little Gray was very fierce. Steamed Bun stared blankly at Little Gray being pressed on the carpet. Steamed Bun's dog eyes showed a trace of fear. Perhaps he was afraid that he would also be beaten by the old man. Steamed Bun lowered his head and ran away with his tail between his legs. You have to play with the children, understand? Young Chongui educated Little Gray. Although he let go of his hand, Little Gray wanted to run and was immediately caught back. After being tossed around a few times, Little Gray dejectedly accepted his fate. Shishi, I think Grandpa can be a hunter. Lon Xian looked at all of this and her eyes suddenly lit up as she said, Yes, Grandpa is a hunter. He will protect us. Shishi also felt that this was a good idea. She grabbed a plastic toy that looked like a pirate holding a sword and walked towards Yang Chongui. Grandpa doesn't need it. Grandpa will just watch you guys play. Yang Chongui hurriedly waved his hand. In any case, he used to be a hero of traversing 4 seas. How could he play house with children, especially a little girl? Grandpa, play with us. Shishi held Yang Chonggui's hand, pouted her little mouth, and shook it. Young Chonggue couldn't stand his granddaughter's soft and cute voice when she started acting spoiled. Okay, Grandpa will play with you guys. Young Chonggue could only take the pirate toy and accept Shishi's arrangement, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. After some time, Yang Yi came back. The recording in the morning was pretty good, so he came back earlier in the afternoon. Passing by the grassland that was turned into mud, Yang Yi saw Murphy, who couldn't do heavy work, passing orange juice to Yang Qing, Zheng Shuyi and the others. Where's Dad and Shishi? Did they go out to the lake again? Yang Yi greeted Yang Qing and then said to Mo Fei with a smile. At the same time he took the plate from his wife's hand. No, Xi and Air came over to play. Dad is looking after them in the living room. Mom went to make lunch. Murphy had something to do, so she was in a good mood. Then I'll go and see them. Yang Yi helped Murphy to a chair and sat down. As soon as he walked in, Yang Yi heard Shishi and Lan Xan shouting. Grandpa Hunter, Mom was taken away by a big tiger. Save her. Grandpa Hunter, save me. He saw Lan Xan holding a doll and pressing it on Little Gray's head. She was also pressing Little Gray from behind. Although Little Gray was also very fat. But at this moment, Little Gray's big round face was really grayish-blue. The kind that had nothing to live for. What surprised Yang Yi was the old man who still couldn't let go of the burden of being an idol. The white-haired old man grabbed the pirate toy and shouted with a serious face, "Ha, tiger, come here." The pirate toy's arm that could move was holding a sword. The old man moved it around as if he was waving a sharp blade. Ha ha ha. Shishi was amused by her grandpa's shout. She laughed so hard that she lay on the panda and forgot to continue making up the next story. Chapter 6:17. This winter was not too cold. Perhaps it was because they were reunited with their eldest son and granddaughter, but Dong Yue and Yang Chonggue were smiling every day. They seemed to have become younger, and their bodies seemed to have become more agile. Yang Chonggue, in particular, circled around his granddaughter happily. There was no trace of the old-fashioned old man he used to be. Except for occasionally reprimanding Yang Yi, Yang Chonggue was kind most of the time, especially in front of Shishi. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was late November. It was a rare sunny weekend. Yang Yi held a stone slab barbecue activity in his yard. In fact, he used natural volcanic stone slabs to replace the iron frame on the barbecue rack. The charcoal burned the stone slabs. When the thick steak was placed on them, it immediately made a sizzling sound. The oil in the food seeped out, and was roasted by the stone slabs. Just by smelling the first aroma, Shishi, who was next to them, danced with excitement, and shouted with Lan Xian. Yang Yi sprinkled spices on the stone slabs, made 2 cuts, and smeared sauce on them. The golden exterior and tender interior of the stone slabs made the 2 girls salivate. Of course, the chef had to continue the barbecue. Yang Yi put the grilled steak on a plate covered with lettuce. The green lettuce and the oily steak formed a sharp contrast. He brought it to Murphy and asked her to help cut it and distribute it to everyone. Eat. Shishi ran around her mother and jumped desperately. Not to mention the 2 little foodies, even Bao Bao, who smelled the aroma, was wagging his tail desperately. The advantage of the stone slab barbecue was that it was evenly heated. As long as one paid attention to the fire, it would not be easy to burn. The moisture in the ingredients would not be lost as when directly grilled with charcoal. Murphy cut 2 small pieces and waited for them to cool down. She handed them to Shishi and Lan Xian with a fork. The 2 girls could not wait to take a bite. The extremely elastic ribeye steak tasted good. After chewing for 2 bites, the fragrant meat juice overflowed their mouths. This feeling. There was no need to describe it. Just by looking at Shishi's intoxicated big eyes, one could know the feeling. Of course, Murphy cut the rest of the steak and gave everyone a piece. Shishi and Lan Xian, who came to their senses and found that the meat was gone, cried anxiously. Don't worry. Dad is still grilling. The piece just now was just for you to taste and see if it was too salty. Murphy smiled and patted their heads. She comforted them. And I've grilled a few more pieces this time. I promise, it will be enough for you. I'm not in a hurry to eat it. Mo Fei, cut this piece and let the child eat first. Young Chonggue stuffed his plate back. His granddaughter's frowning appearance really made him feel distressed. Dad, you can't give them whatever they want. Sometimes, you have to let them learn to take care of other people's feelings. Even if it's something you like, you can't eat it all the time. You should share it with your friends and family at the same table. Murphy hesitated and said. Recently, Yang Chonggue's doting on Shishi made Murphy feel a little inappropriate. She talked about this with Yang Yi in private. Yang Yi's attitude was that they were all his family. If there was anything wrong, he could point it out directly. There was no need to be too reserved. That would be treating them as outsiders. Yang Chonggue was stunned. He did not know that he wanted to leave his share of meat for his granddaughter to eat. Suddenly, he was a little unhappy. The old man's temper was firm, but he could not reprimand Murphy. He just frowned. Shishi blinked her big eyes. She looked at her mother, and then looked at her grandfather. She seemed to understand something. The little girl stepped on the grass and ran to her grandfather's side. She pulled her grandfather's clothes and said softly, "Grandpa, I don't want yours. You eat it too. Papa's grilled meat is super delicious. Have a taste." As for Lan Xian, she had already surrounded Yang Yi, waiting for the next piece of meat. Listening to his granddaughter's persuasion, Yang Chonggue felt that the unhappiness in his heart suddenly disappeared. He smiled and picked up the piece of meat and said, "Well then, Grandpa will eat it." Shishi licked her mouth and finally made up her mind. She nodded and said, "Eat it quickly. Otherwise, it won't taste good when it gets cold." "You know this," Zheng Shuyi said in surprise. There was another burst of laughter. "Old man, I think Murphy is right." Dong Yu took advantage of the opportunity and scolded her childish old man. "Children are not young anymore. There are some rules to be learned. When Taizi and Qingzi were young, didn't you teach them benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and faith?" At that time, Yang Yi and Yang Qing were scolded to stand aside and could not eat. It could only be said that a son was different from a granddaughter. "Actually, it's my fault. I was too direct just now." Murphy also quickly apologized. "It's okay. I still have to say what I have to say. Dad, I think you're spoiling Cece a little too much. This isn't good. There are some principles that you taught me." Yang Yi turned around and interjected with a smile. In fact, Yang Chonggue had already thought it through, but he wanted to save face and refused to admit his mistake. He put on a straight face again, stood up and said, "I'm going to grill meat for little Yang Shi." "Grandpa, you know how to grill meat too?" She skipped behind her grandpa. "Little Yang Shi, you're underestimating your grandpa. Back then, your grandpa caught a pheasant in the forest, covered it with soil, buried it, and grilled it with fire. It was delicious. Wow." The old man was bragging while the little one was listening with great interest. It was quite an interesting contrast. "Ignore him. This old man has such a weird temper." Dong Yu protected her daughter-in-law. "By the way, why didn't Huan come today?" Zheng Shuyi asked curiously and changed the topic. Murphy explained, Huan has an activity in school today. She's a university student. It's good for her to join some club activities and make some friends. However, was Yang Huan really going to join a club activity? At this moment, Yang Huan was sitting in Ding Xiang's car outside the Jiangnan military zone. She had to come for an audition today. In order to hide it from Yang Yi, she had to make up an excuse. The audition venue was in the guest house outside the Jiangnan military zone. The filming of Drawing Sword was also a collaboration with the Jiangnan military zone. However, the crew had not yet moved into the zone, and had to wait until everything was ready. Chun Fengchen's assistant would bring the crew's information to the army to apply for a pass. When they arrived at the guest house, someone arranged for Yang Huan to sign in, and asked her to wait in a conference room. There were about 10 people in the conference room, all of them women. It seemed that they were there to audition for the role of Xiuqin. Almost everyone had a hemp braid, and a few of them were even wearing retro cotton padded jackets. Those were the characteristics of Xiuqin in the book. So many people? Yang Huan's heart was pounding and she whispered to Ding Xiang. Chapter 6:18. After all, it was a TV series directed by Chen Fengchen. For example, Soldiers' Assault had been scheduled as a spring drama and aired during prime time. The TV series became popular before it even aired, and the story of Drawing Sword was no worse than that of Soldiers' Assault. Naturally, there were many small-time actors who wanted to join Chen Fengchen's team. Moreover, they had the support of their respective management companies and were well prepared for the audition. Yang Huan and Ding Xiang were rookies. They had done nothing but study the original novel. Now, they had come here so casually. Yang Huan's confidence was greatly reduced when compared to them. Don't be afraid. They're not necessarily better than you. Ding Xiang could only comfort Yang Huan in a low voice. Huan, do you want me to braid you too? However, it was too late. While Ding Xiang and Yang Huan were talking, the staff was already in an uproar, saying that Chen Fengchen had arrived. They did not dare to move. After a while, Chen Fengchen appeared at the door of the conference room. Welcome to Comrade Xiuqin's audition. I believe that you've all read the original novel of Drawing Sword and have a certain understanding of the character. The staff will send you the audition script in a while. You'll be given 20 minutes to read it. After that, you'll audition according to the order of drawing lots. Chen Fengchen looked around and only glanced at Yang Huan. He then began to speak calmly. Chen Fengchen's voice was gentle, but the prestige he had built up over a long period of time still made the small-time actors keep quiet. It was not until Chen Fengchen turned around and left that the buzzing of voices in the conference room stopped. He didn't seem to recognize me, Yang Huan said to Ding Xiang with a smile. Why are you still concerned about that at a time like this? Ding Xiang said angrily. It's time to read the script. However, after Chen Fengchen left, an even fiercer man came. He held a thick stack of papers and said sternly, Unrelated personnel, please leave, including the agents who came with the actors. Only actors can stay here. You can wait in the guest hall. Ding Xiang had no choice but to leave with the other agents and assistants, leaving Yang Huan alone. Yang Huan was a little uneasy. When she received the script and drew lots, she became even more flustered. Why am I the first one? Yang Huan looked at the paper and was dumbfounded. Why did she draw such an unlucky lot? Being the first one meant that she would have to face a test right from the start. This also meant that she only had 20 minutes left to read the script. Unlike other actors, she could take advantage of the time she took to read the script. Time ticked by. Yang Huan shook his head and felt that he could not afford to waste any more time. What are you afraid of? Worst comes to worst, we'll just go back to school and continue our lessons. We'll have plenty of chances in the future. Yang Huan gritted his teeth and roared in his heart. How could Sister Huan be frightened by such a small matter? Yang Huan made up his mind and read the script carefully. The script for the audition was just a thin page. The plot was about Xiuqin picking up the blood bubbles on Li Yunlong's feet and then confessing her love for him. It was not the plot where Xiuqin was held hostage by the Japanese and sacrificed herself on the city wall as Yang Huan and Ding Xiang had speculated. Regardless, Yang Huan had carefully studied the plot of Xiuqin in Drawing Sword. What she needed to do now was to memorize the dialogue as soon as possible. It wasn't easy for Yang Huan, who wasn't a straight-A student, to memorize a textbook. 20 minutes later, the assistant who distributed the script asked solemnly, Who drew number 1 just now? Come with me. Yang Huan quickly picked up the script in her hand and stood up. Let's go. The assistant sized up Yang Huan and led the way out of the meeting room without saying much. Yang Huan left her seat and quickly followed. Before leaving, she couldn't help but glance at the meeting room from the corner of her eye. The other actors in the meeting room were also looking at her. Some tried to hide it, while others did not bother to hide the ridicule in their eyes. Perhaps they thought that Yang Huan had no chance since she was called out so early. Or perhaps they thought that Yang Huan was not worthy of being their opponent when they saw her dressed like a modern person with her hair draped over her shoulders without any preparation. Yang Huan saw their eyes and felt a little unhappy, but she did not think too much about it. She was still memorizing the lines on the script as she walked up the stairs of the guest house. Finally, it was time for the test. Yang Huan returned the script to the assistant and pushed the door open. It was also a small meeting room, but the other furnishings had been moved out. There were only a few connected tables with a few people sitting behind them, including Chen Fengchen. In front of them, there was a chair, which was used as a prop for Yang Huan's performance. It was used as a bed. Before Yang Huan could speak, Chen Fengchen waved his hand and said nonchalantly, "All right, let's skip the pleasantries. You're Yang Huan, right? Or Jiang Chuan student?" Chen Fengchen flipped through the resume that the assistant had given him and had a rough impression. He then turned around and introduced, "This is Mr. Shenwani. He will rehearse with you later, but he will only be responsible for reading the lines. You will perform the rest. Do you understand?" Actually, Chen Fengchen didn't need to personally host the audition, but the old man was a little stubborn. He believed that he had to be the one in charge of the audition and couldn't let anyone influence his judgment. There were still a lot of tricks that could be played during the audition. Yang Huan nodded quickly. "Shenwani?" Yang Huan glanced at the man sitting beside Chen Fengchen, who was about 50 years old. His face was as resolute as his name, and his every movement had a decisive aura. Yang Huan was familiar with this name. In class, the teacher had told him that this actor was an award-winning actor. His acting was comparable to Mr. Dao Ming and Mr. Shuejian in Yang Yi's previous life. He had played many classic roles, leading roles and supporting roles. However, it was not the roles themselves that were classic, but the roles became classic because of his excellent acting skills. Mr. Shenwani was going to play Li Yunlong. Director Chen Fengchen was really capable and had good taste. Yang Huan felt as if Li Yunlong was sitting in front of him when Mr. Shen was sitting there. "Are you ready?" Chen Fengchen repeated impatiently when Yang Huan's mind wandered. "Yes, I'm ready." Yang Huan nodded quickly. "Let's start with Monk Wei." Shenwani coughed and pressed the cigarette in his hand. He picked up the script and started reading. "Hey, Sister Xiuqin, the leader is sleeping. Let's talk tomorrow." Shenwani's voice sounded much younger when he played Monk Wei, and his solid acting skills were immediately reflected. Hearing this dialogue, Yang Huan suddenly thought of Guo Debao, who was also a big bald guy. She remembered that she had accidentally entered Viper's military camp and confronted Guo Debao. Chapter 619. Of course, the two stories weren't similar, but Yang Huan suddenly found the right feeling. She felt a little unruly. "Hey, the leader hasn't chased me away yet, but you're here?" Yang Huan frowned and looked ahead with dissatisfaction, as if Guo Debao was standing in front of her. The stubbornness in her heart was reflected on her face. "I'm not here to look for you. You don't have to talk." Yang Huan rolled her eyes, but her tone wasn't that aggressive. She seemed to be mumbling stubbornly. Frankly speaking, Yang Huan's acting skills were average, but she was acting as herself after all. Her acting was very realistic, which immediately made Chen Fengchen, who was sitting behind the stage, brighten up. Shenwani continued. "Monk, how can you talk to your colleagues like that?" Comrade Xiuqin is talking to me. That's a public conversation. Don't talk nonsense with him. Go back and sleep." Shenwani played two roles, but he didn't make a mess. When he was acting as Li Yunlong, he used his original voice, which was calm and controlled. When he scolded at the end, it was also very dignified. Yang Huan glanced at the non-existent Guo Debao proudly, just like when her brother came. The corners of her mouth curled up, and she was secretly happy. She even snorted softly. However, when Chen Fengchen saw this, he muttered in his heart, "Is this snort necessary?" He was a little worried that this snort would ruin Xiuqin's image. Many thoughts flashed through his mind. However, when Yang Huan pretended to walk into Li Yunlong's room, her unruly attitude disappeared. She seemed to become a little shy. "Regiment commander." Looking at her slowly walking in, she didn't know where to put her hands. Yang Huan had experience in this. When her second sister-in-law entered the house for the first time, Yang Huan was also there. She could understand this feeling of shyness. When Shenwani was reading Li Yunlong's lines, Yang Huan reached out to grab the hair on her shoulder. It would be great if it was a braid. No, Yang Huan could only pretend that it was a braid. She was afraid that her image would be ruined, and this small action reflected her chaotic thoughts. Chen Fengchen and Shenwani looked at each other, and saw the admiration in each other's eyes. This girl is not bad. Ah, leader, why is there such a big blister on your leg? Yang Huan's eyes became worried as if she had seen something. She spoke nervously to the air in front of her. It was as if at this moment, her original thoughts were thrown to the back of her mind, and her first concern was Li Yunlong's condition. Xinhuani played along and smiled awkwardly. Hee, let me see. Yang Huan sat down on a chair and reached out to grab something. Hey, don't. After the argument, Yang Huan lowered his head and watched for a while. Then he raised his head and looked to the front. The heartache in his eyes was apparent. There was nothing wrong with the dialogue in the middle. When Yang Huan was acting, she gradually revealed her true nature. Just like Xiuqin, she couldn't hide it. Some of her brute force made her role more vivid. The more Chen Fengchen watched, the more he found it interesting. However, he didn't know that it wasn't because Yang Huan was good at acting, but because she really had such a personality. What Chen Fengchen found interesting was the part where Yang Huan used candlelight to disinfect the needles, and then removed the blisters on Li Yunlong's body. Although there wasn't much to say from her expression, her actions were on point. After all, Yang Huan was a girl from the countryside. She even knew how to sew her own clothes. Although she had never done something as simple as removing blisters for others, she had done it for herself before. When it hurt, she didn't even frown. Therefore, these performances were just simulations based on her life experience. However, the more Chen Fengchen watched, the better he felt Yang Huan's acting was. Her every movement and expression were extremely similar to the Xiuqin he had imagined. Moreover, Yang Huan was tall and slender. She looked good sitting there. After Yang Huan and Xinhuani finished their act, Chen Fengchen didn't rush to let Yang Huan leave. Instead, he hesitated and said, "Do you remember the scene on the city wall before Xiuqin died?" Yang Huan was a little surprised, but she still replied quickly, "Yes." Act out her performance on the city wall. There's no script. Just one sentence. Li Yunlong, fire the cannon. I belong to you in life and I'll be your ghost in death. Remember, I, Xiuqin, will still marry you in my next life. Chen Fengchen said after hesitating for a while. This sentence was still fresh in Chen Fengchen's memory. Because Xiuqin's character had shocked Grandpa Chen the most, it was this sentence in Yang Yi's original novel. Therefore, Chen Fengchen asked the scriptwriter to include this sentence in the script. However, it was a little difficult for Yang Huan to act out this scene now. After all, there was no suitable scene and no time for her to develop feelings. Chen Fengchen was a little worried that he was asking for too much. However, Chen Fengchen wanted to see something other than the tender side of Yang Huan's confession. Moreover, a qualified actress wouldn't be so pretentious. If she wanted to act, she had to adapt to all kinds of situations and be able to speak at any time. Yang Huan wasn't stupid. She knew that this extra scene was her chance. She was a little excited. She took a few deep breaths to calm herself down. Then, she stood up from the chair and put her hands behind her back, just like how Guadabeo tied her up with his smelly belt last year. Even though she was tied up, Yang Huan still wouldn't lower her head. She raised her head slightly, just like last time, supported by her pride. Her expression was still firm, but her eyes were sad and desperate. As if she was struggling, she twisted her body forward and opened her mouth without caring about her image. She shouted, "Li Yunlong, fire the cannon. I give birth to." Her voice made the small conference room explode. Chen Fengchen and Xinhuani looked at each other and rubbed their ears with bitter smiles. Their eardrums felt like they were being torn. However, Yang Huan seemed to be possessed by Xiuqin. She shouted with all her might, which made her lose control of her emotions. Her big eyes were covered with a layer of mist. Chen Fengchen didn't know if it was because she was excited or because she was really affected by her emotions, but her moist eyes really touched them. After Yang Huan finished her performance and calmed down, Chen Fengchen nodded at her and said, "Are you a student of the Jiangchuan Film Academy? Which grade are you in?" Chen Fengchen was also interested in Yang Huan, so he said a few more words. Otherwise, he would have ignored Yang Huan and asked her to go out and wait for the news. Of course, Chen Fengchen wouldn't give such an important role to Yang Huan so hastily after meeting an actress. He just admired this slightly intelligent actress, and wanted to communicate with her. Even if Yang Huan regretted not being chosen for the role of Xiao Qin in the future, Chen Fengchen would remember this actress and invite her to try out for a suitable role. Yang Huan didn't know that. She quickly nodded and said, I just started school this year. I'm a freshman. I used to go to school late at home. She was 20 years old, 2 years older than her classmates in the same grade. I saw in your resume that you know martial arts. Do you really know it? Or are you faking it? Chen Fengchen liked Yang Huan, so he kindly reminded her. If you don't really know it, don't put it in your resume. Sometimes, when we need a real female fighting star, your fake resume may leave a bad impression on the director. I really know it. Yang Huan had no choice but to show them her boxing skills on the spot. This gave her a lot of points, even if the role of Xiao Qin didn't require her to know martial arts. Chen Fengchen was satisfied and was about to end the small talk and let Yang Huan leave, but Shen Wanyi was one step ahead. He took Yang Huan's resume and looked at it with interest. He smiled and said, Yang Huan, your name is quite interesting. Your surname is also Yang, the same as the author of the original novel. I wonder if you're from the same family. Haha. Chapter 620. In fact, Shen Wanyi was just joking. He continued to give some comments and said, for a first-year student in the performing arts department to be able to perform like this, it means that your foundation is not bad and you have done a lot of preparation. However, the scream just now seemed to have exaggerated your emotions towards your lover. But in reality, what Xiao Qin expressed here was a kind of heroic determination to die. It would have been better if you could control your emotions freely. Sorry, Director Chen. I'm used to being a teacher. I couldn't help but say something. Shen Wanyi realized that he wasn't in a class at Beijing Film Academy, so he cupped his hands at Chen Fengchen with a smile. However, Yang Huan and Chen Fengchen's expressions became weird when they heard the joke. Chen Fengchen was very busy, so he definitely wouldn't remember every name that appeared in front of him. But with Shen Wanyi's reminder, Chen Fengchen suddenly remembered the big trouble caused by Geng Sha's friend visiting the set during the filming of Soldier's Assault last year. Wasn't Yang Yi's sister also called Yang Huan? Chen Fengchen looked at Yang Huan. Although he didn't look at her carefully, he had seen her before. The more he looked at her, the more familiar she looked. You, aren't you? Chen Fengchen was still unsure. However, Yang Huan admitted it herself. She thought that she had been recognized, so she nodded with a wry smile. She stuck out her tongue and said embarrassedly, Director Chen, don't tell my brother that I came here secretly without telling him. If I can't get the role of Xiao Qin, I can pretend that nothing happened. She was right. Chen Fengchen clicked his tongue as if he had a toothache. She sneaked out without telling her brother again. This girl is really a troublemaker. What's going on? Do you know each other? Shen Wanyi asked in confusion. However, his expression also changed slightly. You were right. She's the author, Yang Yi's sister, Chen Fengchen said in a muffled voice. That's bad. Shen Wanyi's expression became weird. He had known Chen Fengchen for decades and knew his temper. The more connections someone had, the less he liked to use them. He would even throw a tantrum on the spot. Alright, that's all for today. Go back and wait for the news. Chen Fengchen waved his hand, but in the end he hesitated and added, But I want you to understand that I won't let you play Xiao Qin just because of Yang Yi. If there are other good actors, I will choose them based on merit. Understood. Yang Huan was still wondering why the old man had suddenly become so serious, but now she felt the pressure. She hurriedly nodded and politely bade farewell. She was the first one to go in for a long time, and the assistant outside was a little impatient. When she saw her come out, she hurriedly went to the conference room to call the second actor to prepare for the audition. After Yang Huan left, Shen Wanyi couldn't help but ask, Old Chen, don't reject her just because she's Yang Yi's sister. I think she's not bad. Let's not talk about her acting skills, but the role of Xiao Qin suits her very well. I have my own considerations. Chen Fengchen frowned and waved his hand. Ding Xiang was a little surprised that Yang Huan came out so early, but there were too many people in the hall. She didn't ask Yang Huan about the details until they got into the car. I think I acted pretty well, but my name was leaked and Director Chen recognized me. But I don't think he'll tell my brother. This way, even if I don't get chosen, I won't be afraid of being embarrassed. Yang Huan was actually a little nervous. Instead of saying that to Ding Xiang, she was actually comforting herself. This is your first performance. You're indeed a little unlucky. Ding Xiang was a little worried. She didn't have much experience and didn't know how to comment. She comforted Yang Huan. But if you think you did well, then it's fine. We can challenge other roles next time. You don't have to be nervous anymore. After all, you've been through the hardest part. Yang Huan smiled sweetly. Let's go back. Ding Xiang started the car. Hey, wait. Since we're close to the Jiangnan military district, I'll go and see Guo Debao and thank him, Yang Huan said. Ding Xiang didn't know what Yang Huan was referring to, but she didn't ask. She drove the car to the entrance of the Jiangnan military district and stopped by the roadside. Hold my phone for me. They don't let me bring my phone inside. I'll be out soon anyway, Yang Huan said to Ding Xiang. After some time, Yang Huan saw Guo Debao in the reception room behind the entrance of the Jiangnan military district. Why are you here? Although Guo Debao had made a difficult decision, he still couldn't help but stutter when he saw Yang Huan. Brother Debao, I'm here to thank you. Yang Huan patted Guo Debao's shoulder and said with a smile. Thank me? Guo Debao was shocked. Why? Yang Huan rolled her eyes. She suddenly became shy. She smiled shyly and lowered her head. Brother Debao, what do you think of me? Yang Huan asked shyly. Not only did she change her appearance, but her accent also sounded like a northern accent. Just when Guo Debao couldn't take it anymore, Yang Huan couldn't hold it in anymore and laughed. She waved her hand and said to Guo Debao, Brother Debao, I'm sorry. I was just joking with you. So it was a joke. Guo Debao secretly breathed a sigh of relief. To be honest, Yang Huan didn't think too much about it. She treated Guo Debao as a good friend, just like Guo Zi and Ding Xiang. As the saying goes, friendship grows from discord. It was fate that brought them together after a fight. After joking, Yang Huan explained to Guo Debao. I'm using Xiuqin's lines from Drawing Sword. You know Drawing Sword written by my brother, right? Guo Debao nodded. The Jiangnan military district had promoted Yang Yi's 2 military novels the most. Of course he had read them. There's a director shooting this drama now, so I came to audition. I want to play the role of Xiuqin, Yang Huan continued. However, don't tell anyone. On the one hand, the script is confidential. On the other hand, I don't want to be laughed at if I don't get chosen. Didn't you say you wanted to thank me? Guo Debao couldn't help but ask, why? Only then did Yang Huan realize that she had gone off topic. She smiled and said, oh yes, it's like this. During the audition just now, there was a scene where Xiuqin was bickering with Monk Wei. I thought of the fight with you last year. Then, there was a scene where Xiuqin was tied to the tower before she sacrificed herself. I also thought of you tying me with a belt. Didn't we agree not to mention the past? Guo Debao's face turned red. Yang Huan really touched on his sore spot. Guo Debao felt embarrassed just thinking about it. Sai, I don't blame you this time. Yang Huan patted Guo Debao's shoulder casually and smiled. And I have to thank you for giving me the inspiration. I think I acted very well. I just don't know if I'll be chosen. Looking at Yang Huan's beaming face, Guo Debao suddenly understood the meaning of Captain Li's words. That's about it. I wanted to tell you since I'm on the way. If I really get chosen in the future, I'll tell you the good news. If you have a holiday, I'll treat you to a meal. Yang Huan smiled. Guo Debao scratched his head and smiled. I don't know if I have a holiday. It depends. However, his smile was much calmer. If there's nothing else, I'll go back. Yang Huan waved at Guo Debao and said, I've been out for a long time. If I don't go back, my brother will scold me. Hey, wait. There's something I want to tell you, Guo Debao said after hesitating for a moment. Go ahead. Yang Huan nodded. Here's the thing. I applied for a secondment to the Southwest Military Region, which is the army that Brother Yang Yi used to be in for 3 years, Guo Debao said. Yang Huan was shocked. She looked around and asked Guo Debao in a low voice, Go to Wolf War? Why? It's dangerous there. I heard that there are a lot of drug dealers. Guadabeo nodded and said honestly, because I want to go to a place with real combat opportunities to improve myself. I always feel that my strength has reached a bottleneck. Guadabeo did not lie to Yang Huan. This was indeed a big part of the reason. Moreover, Guadabeo had always wanted to join the Wolf War Special Forces. When he was not troubled by love, he looked at masters like Shen Xinyu and Yang Yi and felt that Wolf War was a holy land that he wanted to worship. Some time ago, he had the opportunity to go to Wolf War. However, because of Yang Huan's appearance, he was lost for a moment. After the conversation with Captain Li and the fight, Guadabeo finally made up his mind. Going to Wolf War was not a bad thing. 3 years later, when Guadabeo returned, he would be an instructor in Viper. His rank might even be the same as Captain Li's. This was also an opportunity. However, Guadabeo was more focused on improving his strength. Hearing Guadabeo's words, Yang Huan was stunned for a while before he said slowly, "Although I don't agree with what you said, I can understand your thoughts." Born in a martial arts family, Yang Huan had seen the craziness of his father, eldest brother, and second brother in the pursuit of martial arts. When Yang Yi was in the army, his performance was even better than Guadabeo's. "I don't know how to persuade you, but I hope you can be careful." Yang Huan sighed and went forward to hug Guadabeo. "Thank you. I will definitely become stronger." Guadabeo clenched his fists confidently. He was no longer as cautious as before. He was in high spirits like Luffy who was about to conquer the Sea of Stars. While Yang Huan was talking to Guadabeo in the military zone, Ding Xiang was sitting in the car when she suddenly heard her phone ring. It was not her phone but Yang Huan's. Ding Xiang hurriedly picked it up and saw that it was Yang Yi's call. "What should I do?" Ding Xiang's eyes widened. However, the ringtone did not stop, as if there was something urgent. Brother Yang." Ding Xiang had no choice but to pick it up and stutter. Ding Xiang did not know how to lie. She did not know how to deal with Yang Yi's interrogation later. Why is it Ding Xiang who picked up the phone? Where's Huan Huan? Yang Yi's voice came through. It sounded like it was on speaker. It was very noisy on the other side. She didn't bring her phone with her. Ding Xiang was in despair. If Yang Yi continued to ask, she was afraid that she would not be able to hold back and tell him everything. However, Yang Yi had no intention of asking. He said excitedly, "Tell Huan Huan to go to the hospital last time. Murphy is about to give birth. It's real this time. Let's not talk about it. I'm still driving." Chapter 621. Half an hour ago, everything was as usual. After the outdoor barbecue activity, the whole family chatted and laughed in the living room. They sat on the sofa and seemed to have formed a circle, listening to Cece tell her story. Just now I went home with Xi and Papa. There was a heater in the room, so it was warmer. Shishi had taken off her thick cotton-padded jacket and was only wearing a thin coat, which made her look particularly lively. "We sent Xi home. Our home is here." Yang Yi smiled and corrected his daughter's story. "Okay." The little girl blinked her big eyes and said clearly, "We sent Xi home, and then we played with Xi's dog." Baozi, who was lying on the side, pricked up his ears and turned around, but lowered his head, as if he was a little wronged. "Get to the point. Tell your grandparents. What did you say to Xi's father?" Yang Yi reminded her with a smile. Children's words carried no harm, and Yang Yi was amused by his daughter at that time. Xi's papa said, "Xi, what did you play at Shishi's house?" Shishi had a good memory, and she also learned the casual tone of Lance Hao Kai. However, the little girl's voice didn't change, and it was still so sweet, which made people feel that it was very cute. Xi said, "We ate barbecue meat. Then I also told Xi's papa that the barbecue meat of Papa was super delicious." The little girl beamed with joy, as if she felt that she had done something extraordinary. This made Yang Chonggui and Dong Yue, who were looking at her, couldn't help but laugh happily. And then? Didn't Xi's father say to Xi, "You ate meat again? Look at your bulging belly. You must have eaten a lot." How can you lose weight if you eat so much? Yang helplessly guided Shishi back to the topic at hand. What did you say? The little girl looked at her father with her big bright eyes. She tilted her head and thought for a while. Then she said excitedly, I know. I asked Xionair's papa. What's trimming? Xionair is going to lose weight? It doesn't matter. I can lend my mama's scissors to Xionair. Hearing this, Yang couldn't help but laugh. Even though he had been laughing for a long time at Kai's house in Lanzhou Kai, it was the first time for the others. After they understood what Shishi meant, they laughed one after another. Oh, I know it's not trimming. Papa told me it's not scissors. Seeing that everyone was laughing, the little girl was bashful for a moment. She pouted and explained in embarrassment. I'm just being nice. Why are you laughing at me? However, she was even more adorable when she explained seriously. Yang Chongwei was convulsing with laughter. Yang Qing, who was slow to react, also shook his head with a smile after he asked Zheng Shuyi in a low voice what was funny. Murphy was laughing so hard that her stomach cramped. Ouch, ouch. Mo Fei thought that she had a stomachache because of laughing, so she tried her best not to laugh. But even if she stopped laughing, her stomach still hurt. Yang Yi was still very sensitive to this. He turned his head and looked over. Then he walked over with concern. He grabbed Murphy's hand and asked, What's wrong? Mo Fei thought that it was just the occasional false contractions as usual. But Dong Yue was experienced. When she saw the blood on Murphy's white pants, she suddenly stood up and said excitedly, It's red. She's going to give birth. This time, the whole family was in a commotion. Everyone hurriedly packed up and wanted to send Murphy to the hospital. However, fortunately, Murphy and Yang Yi had rehearsed in the middle of the night. Yang Yi was already prepared. He went upstairs and took out a bulging luggage bag, which was full of things that would be used later, such as milk powder for pregnant women, toiletries, towels for the baby, diapers for Mo Fei, abdominal straps for Mo Fei after giving birth, and so on. He then took out another luggage bag and put Murphy's clothes into it. When Yang Yi was packing, he looked up and saw Shishi leaning against the bed and looking at him pitifully. Shishi was the center of everyone's attention just now. Then suddenly, there was chaos, and no one paid attention to her. The little girl was disappointed and confused. What's wrong? Yang Yi stopped what he was doing and walked over. He bent down and reached out to help his daughter lift her hair behind her ear. He asked gently, Mommy is going to give birth to a baby. Are you not happy? Shishi squeezed into her father's arms and called out as if she had been wronged. Yang Yi gently touched his daughter's head as if he was comforting a kitten, but he didn't know what to say. Papa, is Mom bleeding because I told her a story? The little girl raised her little head. Her big eyes revealed a sad expression as she asked self-reproachfully, Was this the reason? Yang Yi squatted down and shook his head with a smile. He looked into Shishi's eyes and said seriously, How could that be? Mommy is going to give birth to a baby. Because it's time for her to give birth to a baby. Her belly has been big for a long time. Don't you think so? Even if you didn't tell her a story, Mommy is still going to give birth to a baby today. Really? The little girl still didn't feel at ease and asked. Really? And this is a good thing. Shouldn't you be happy? Yang Yi asked softly. Shishi nodded. However, looking at her pitiful little face, she didn't seem to be happy at all. Yang Yi patted his daughter's little head. When he was about to go back to tidy up, Shishi suddenly stretched out her little arms and hugged her father's neck. She pursed her lips in grievance. This strong sense of dependence made Yang Yi feel as if he had returned to the time when he first saw his daughter. The little girl had grown up a little and was not so clingy to her father. Before Yang Yi could react, Shishi hugged her father's neck and anxiously said, Papa, will you always love me? In fact, Shishi was very happy that she could become an elder sister. However, she didn't know why, but today she suddenly felt a little melancholy and panic in her heart. Of course, Daddy will always love you. Yang Yi gently kissed his daughter's forehead and hugged Shishi a little tighter. His daughter's dependence touched the softest part of a father's heart. When Yang Yi finished tidying up and came down, Shishi had already untied the knot in her heart. Her little face had a relaxed and happy smile. However, her clinginess to her father hadn't disappeared yet. Yang Yi was holding a luggage bag in each hand. Shishi was hanging on her father's chest like a koala. She was afraid that she would fall down, so she tightly clamped her father's ribs with her legs. Even so, the feeling of falling down still made the little girl giggle in fear and amusement. After sending Murphy to the hospital, the doctor gave Murphy a checkup. After the doctor confirmed that Murphy's signs of labor this time didn't release any false signals. She was really going to give birth. However, it was still uncertain when she would give birth. It could only be said that it would happen within 24 hours. Therefore, everyone could only wait. However, they couldn't just wait. Yang Yi asked Yang Qing and Zheng Shuyi to go back first, and asked them to prepare lunch and dinner, and send it to the hospital. Yang Chongui and Dong Yue refused to go back to rest. Fortunately, Yang Yi booked a luxurious delivery room for Murphy. It was fully equipped, just like a hotel room. There were sofas for the two elders and Shishi to sit down and rest. Yang Yi moved a stool and sat next to Murphy's bed. He held her hand to reassure her. I haven't asked you yet. Have you given the child a name? Yang Chongui suddenly asked. Chapter 622. The child's name? Of course there was. The two of them had studied it for a long time before they finally found a name that they liked. So when the old man asked, Yang Yi and Murphy looked at each other and smiled. Murphy asked Yang Yi to introduce. Because we didn't know the gender of the child, we prepared a boy and a girl's name respectively. Yang Yi explained to Yang Chongui. Because in Shishi's name, she means the sun. It means the beautiful sunshine in the morning. Shishi, who was in her grandmother's arms, heard her father say her name. The little girl moved her little but happily. Although the name was a little difficult to write, Shishi still liked it. Not only did it sound nice, but it also had a beautiful meaning. The golden morning sun was not dazzling at all. Instead, it made people feel warm and full of hope. Yang Yi continued. So the second child's name would also correspond to Shishi's name, or it would correspond to the sun, moon, and stars. However, we felt that Yang Yu and Yang Chen were more common, so we didn't decide to use these names. Or it would be similar. Like Shishi, we have the same beautiful wishes for the two children. Yang Yi finally stopped keeping them in suspense. He said proudly. Later we decided to choose a line from the rhyme of the old man in the bamboo hat. The clouds are rolling, the sun is rolling. It describes the morning sun's rays gradually becoming clear. If Murphy gives birth to a boy in the end, he will be called Yang Jian. If she gives birth to a girl, she will be called Yang Jian. After that, Yang Yi waited for his father's praise. However, Yang Chongui and Dong Yue both frowned and looked at him puzzled. Which word are you talking about? Yang Chongui hadn't read the rhyme of the bamboo hat before. There was no such book in this world. Of course, he didn't know that much. In the past, during the war, even though his family was rich, Yang Chongui only learned to read, and was no longer illiterate. This uncouth man liked to fight and kill. He didn't even look for books to read, so naturally he wouldn't suspect anything. Yang Yi had no choice but to borrow a pen and paper from the nurse outside to write for the old man. Shishi even came over and leaned against the small table to watch her father write. This character is not easy to write, Shishi pouted and said. Yang Yi patted his daughter's head and said with a smile, none of them are easy to write. Simple characters are used more often, so it's easy to duplicate names in the future. But that's okay. Even if it's difficult to write, it'll be more distinguishable. He had already thought through this problem. He could not give his child a strange name just for convenience such as Yang Yi or Yang Tai. Yang Chongui took the name that Yang Yi handed over. He opened it and looked at it with Dong Yue. Dong Yue narrowed her eyes and slowly said, I think it should be a boy. Fei Fei already gave birth to a girl, so it should be a boy this time. So what is this boy's name? After all, his grandmother was still somewhat traditional. She was somewhat obsessed with the idea of having a grandson. His name is Yang Yi, and his nickname is Yi. It's the same as Shishi's. It's a repeated name, and it also means bright and sunny. Murphy helped to explain. She even added with a smile. Yang Yi said that Yi's nickname came from a very famous New Year's poem. On the New Year's Eve, thousands of families will always exchange new peaches for old charms. In the sound of firecrackers, the spring breeze brings warmth to Tusu. On the New Year's Eve, thousands of families will always exchange new peaches for old charms. This poem came from Wang Engshi's Yuan Ri. Of course, it didn't exist in this world, but Yang Yi still succeeded in fooling Murphy. Obviously, Yang Chonggui and Dong Yue wouldn't pursue the matter. Dong Yue even felt that the name of the unconfirmed grandson was good and cultured. The old man smiled and was very satisfied. Actually, it's possible to give birth to a boy or a girl. Also, it doesn't matter. Even if Murphy doesn't give birth to a boy, there's still Qingzi, right? Yang Yi was worried that Murphy would be pressured, so he said to his mother, and if it's a girl, this name is also not bad. It's a homonym for Meng Meng. It's very cute. Yang Yi was still trying his best to promote the child's name, but Murphy felt another wave of pain. Everyone was in a mess. Yang Yi quickly ran to the door to call the doctor. Dong Yue couldn't sit still either. She ran to the bedside and asked Murphy to take a deep breath. However, after a while, the doctor came over and found that it was a false alarm. Pain is a normal sign before labor. This situation will continue to occur, and the frequency is about once every 20 minutes to half an hour. The doctor explained to the nervous Yang Yi, "Don't worry. It will only hurt for a few seconds at most. But if the interval is shorter, it will hurt once every 8 or 10 minutes. This means that the child is about to give birth. At that time, we will send her to the delivery room. Don't worry now. The most important thing is to let the pregnant woman have a good rest and recover her energy." At this time, Yang Huan and Ding Xiang finally arrived. "How is it, brother? Has sister-in-law given birth? Is it a boy or a girl?" Yang Huan asked excitedly. "Not yet. It's not so fast," Yang Yi helplessly explained to them. At noon, Yang Qing and Zheng Shuyi brought lunch. Everyone ate in a hurry, mainly to take care of Murphy and let her sleep for a while after lunch. However, the pain from time to time still made Murphy unable to have a good rest. Just when she was a little sleepy, she would be woken up by the pain. Yang Yi's heart ached. He had to sleep even if he couldn't. In order not to disturb Murphy, he had to give her a quiet environment to rest and accumulate energy. Yang Yi asked Yang Qing and Zheng Shuyi to go home, and asked Yang Huan and Ding Xiang to book 2 rooms in the hotel next to the hospital. Yang Chonggui and Dong Yue, who didn't want to go back to wait for the news, stayed in the hotel for lunch. After all, it was winter and the corridor of the hospital was very cold. Yang Huan and Ding Xiang also stayed in the hotel. The school was far away and it was inconvenient for them to go back and forth. Yang Yi couldn't leave. He stayed with Murphy in the room to take care of Murphy. If anything happened, he could help Murphy deal with it. She didn't want to leave her father. At this time, her mother was in the hospital bed. The little girl felt very insecure and clung to her father tightly. She looked at her father with tears in her eyes and said, "Papa, I won't talk. I won't disturb Mom. Please don't drive me away." Yang Yi just wanted her to rest in the hotel, but he couldn't bear to make his daughter sad. "Okay, she will follow me." Yang Yi shook his head and smiled. He rubbed his daughter's little head and said, "But you have to be good." After settling his parents, Yang Yi carried the little girl back to the ward. Murphy was still awake. When she saw Yang Yi come in, she hurriedly closed her eyes, as if she was afraid that Yang Yi would find out and scold her for not sleeping well. Yang Yi put Shishi on the sofa and then walked over with a smile. He pulled up the quilt for her, covered the corner of the quilt, and scratched her nose to show that he had found out about her little trick. Murphy's face turned red, but she still closed her eyes and refused to admit it. Yang Yi didn't talk to her anymore. Instead, he went back to the sofa and put down the foldable sofa, which became a simple accompanying bed. There was also a quilt. It wasn't very thick, but because Shishi was still wearing thick clothes, Yang Yi wasn't too worried that she would catch a cold. Yang Yi pressed Shishi on the accompanying bed. He lay down beside her. The bed was too small, and his long legs were still on the ground. Yang Yi pulled up the quilt and whispered to the little girl, "Go to sleep." He didn't have much to do. Moreover, he had to take care of Murphy. But Shishi didn't take a nap. She would be listless in the afternoon. However, the little girl's big watery eyes were smiling. She clasped her little hands in front of her body, pouted her little mouth, and made a shoe gesture to her father. This little girl who was secretly laughing, was scolding her father? Yang Yi pinched Shishi's little nose, and the corner of his mouth hooked up into a smile. Shishi didn't dare to laugh out loud, for fear that she would disturb her mother. She smiled with curved eyes, and like a groundhog, she burrowed into her father's arms. The quilt hadn't warmed up yet, but her father's embrace was very warm. The little girl squeezed into her father's arms, and a blissful smile appeared on her face. Murphy didn't make everyone wait for too long. At around 4 in the afternoon, her water broke, and she was pushed into the delivery room. The most worrying moment finally arrived. Chapter 6:23. Murphy was actually very calm. She had given birth to Shishi, so she was familiar with the process. On the other hand, Yang Yi was so nervous that he almost followed Murphy into the delivery room. Then he also fidgeted outside the delivery room, pacing back and forth with his fists clenched. On the bench outside the delivery room, Yang Chonggui, Dong Yue, Yang Huan, and Ding Xiang also rushed over and sat there, waiting for the news. Grandpa Shen sat there casually. He was very dissatisfied with Yang Yi's nervous look and said, "If you were in the past, you would have been whipped by the general. A real man should be able to keep a straight face even if Mount Tai collapses in front of you. You should follow orders and kill decisively. How can you panic before things go wrong?" Yang Yi looked at his father speechlessly. Why was he still nagging at him at a time like this? "I'm not afraid. I'm worried about Murphy." Yang Yi wanted to explain, but he was not in the mood to argue with Grandpa Shen. He waved his hand and sat down beside Shishi. The little girl sat on the chair and turned to look at her father. She reached out to grab his big hand. However, Yang Yi was so nervous that his hands were sweating. Feeling his daughter's movements, Yang Yi turned his head and wiped his hands on his body before handing them to Shishi. He thought the little girl was clinging to him again. However, Shishi held her father's hand obediently and said in her clear voice, "Papa, don't be afraid. The baby will be here soon." She was comforting her father. Yang Yi smiled and rubbed the little girl's head lovingly. Of course, he was still nervous. After some time, Yang Yi began to pace outside the delivery room again. From time to time, he would go to the door of the delivery room and look inside through the small glass on the door, but he could not see anything at all. Why is it taking so long? Yang Yi could not help muttering in his heart. A terrible scene appeared in his mind. A nurse rushed out and said to him, "No, do you want to save the mother or the baby?" No, it can't be like this. I can't think about it." Yang Yi shook his head and threw the ridiculous image out of his mind. Yang Huan could not stand it anymore. She complained in a low voice, "Brother, why don't you sit down? Don't be in such a hurry. You're making me feel flustered." Yang Yi just opened his mouth and was about to reply to Yang Huan when he suddenly heard the sound of a baby crying. Separated by many layers of doors, it was very soft and almost inaudible, but Yang Yi heard it. Although Yang Chonggui was almost 70 years old, he still had sharp ears and eyes. He also heard it. Both of them turned to look at the door of the delivery room. After some time, a nurse finally opened the door and came out with a baby. She smiled at Yang Yi and said, "Congratulations, both mother and baby are safe." The moment he saw the baby, Yang Yi was surprised and stunned. He did not know why he was stunned. Anyway, his judgment was very poor. After hearing the nurse's words, he asked the nurse nervously, "Where's Murphy? How's the baby's mother?" The nurse was helpless. She could only say in detail, "The mother is also fine. Don't worry, she's fine. It's just that she's been in labor for a long time, so she's very tired." Yang Yi breathed a sigh of relief. He finally put down the stone in his heart, and a smile appeared on his face. The family members gathered around and looked at the baby in the nurse's arms. Does it have a handle or not? Dong Yue had already heard it, but she could not help but want to confirm it again. Of course it has a handle. Didn't you hear that the mother and baby are safe? Not the mother and daughter. Yang Chonggui said majestically. He had completely forgotten that he was the one who stood up in excitement and almost kicked the chair. I heard it, but I didn't see it. Can't I? Dong Yue glared at her husband as if to say, Hey, you're still acting majestically? Who's the most majestic in this family? Yang Yi ignored the old couple's bickering. He bent down happily and picked up the pitiful Shishi who was squeezed behind. He took her to see the baby in the nurse's arms. Shishi, look, Mom gave birth to a little brother for you. Yang Yi looked at his son and could not help but smile. Shishi blinked her big eyes and looked at her little brother through the small opening of the swaddling clothes. All right, it's too cold outside. You can't look at him for too long. Now we need to take care of him and examine him. The nurse looked at them and then turned to leave with the baby in her arms. Yang Yi had already known the procedure, so he nodded and asked the nurse to leave. Dong Yue, who was worried, followed the nurse, but Yang Yi did not. He had to wait to see how Murphy was doing. Watching her little brother disappear from her sight, Shishi finally could not help but turn around and whisper in her father's ear, Papa, why is my little brother so ugly? Puff. Young Huan heard it and could not help laughing. In fact, Shishi was right. The newborn baby was wrinkled, and his little face was also wrinkled. He was not good looking at all. However, in the eyes of the adults, this moment was sacred, and the little guy curled up was as cute as a little angel. In Yang Yi's eyes, the little guy was perfect. His closed eyelids and small nose were all full of affection. But the honest little girl uncovered the emperor's new clothes. Yang Yi rubbed Shishi's little head with a smile and said, Here's the thing. Now your little brother is just born. He is hungry, so of course he won't be very beautiful. But after a while, when he is full, he will become good looking. Shishi, when you were just born, you were also like this. Is that so? The little girl understood and nodded her little head gently. In fact, at this time, the most important thing to care about was Murphy. Yang Yi was also worried about her. After the doctor agreed, he did not delay and hurriedly carried Shishi into the delivery room to see Murphy. Murphy was lying on the bed, covered with a quilt. She looked tired. Hearing the noise, she gently turned her head and looked at Yang Yi. Yang Yi looked at Murphy's messy hair and tired face. He was so distressed that he did not have time to find a chair, and directly squatted beside her. He gently held Murphy's hand with one hand, and helped Murphy to brush away the hair stuck to her cheek with the other hand. His eyes met with Murphy's and he said softly, You have worked hard. It was just 4 simple words, but Mo Fei had a feeling that time had staggered. It was as if she had suddenly traveled to more than 5 years ago, when Shishi was just born. It was as if the image had changed back to the present, when Yang Yi held her hand. Everything became so real and warm. For some reason, Murphy's inner emotions were tumbling. Her eyes were misty and hot tears fell from the corners of her eyes. Hey, why are you crying? Yang Yi was a little puzzled and stood up in a panic. Why are you crying? Aren't you fine? Is there something wrong? Do you want me to call the doctor? Murphy felt Yang Yi's concern and the corners of her mouth curved into a happy smile. She gently shook her head. After a while, she said in a slightly hoarse voice, No, I'm happy because I have you by my side. Yang Yi was relieved. He also somewhat understood Murphy's meaning. He smiled and squatted down again. He held Murphy's hand and gently kissed it. He said softly, It was my fault in the past. In the future, I will accompany you well. The two of them looked at each other affectionately and completely forgot that Shishi was beside them. Finally, Murphy saw Shishi's big bright eyes. She said softly, Shishi, I'm sorry for making you wait. The little girl was thinking about something else. She said to Mom, Mom, can you give Tong Tong more food? What? Murphy was a little confused. Because Papa said that Tong Tong needs to eat more to become beautiful. Shishi said very seriously. Yang Yi whispered to Murphy about the explanation he gave to his daughter just now. Murphy couldn't help but laugh. You guys. You're still making me laugh. What if your stomach hurts? Okay, hurry up and rest. You're exhausted. Yang Yi became nervous again. I'll ask Shuyi to make you something to eat. Chapter 624. Many things happened on the first day of the baby's birth. Although Yang Yi had made a lot of preparations, He was still in a flurry when it came to actual combat. He went out to make a phone call and asked his sister-in-law to make some brown sugar millet porridge and egg soup. After the phone call, he patted his head. How could he forget? He had even brought some milk powder for Murphy. If she was in a hurry, it would be better to make some warm milk for her. Yang Huan and Ding Xiang helped to get the milk powder, the thermos, and the straws for drinking water. Yang Yi asked the nurse for hot water. Yang Chonggui and Dong Yue wanted to help, but with so many young people around, they didn't need to do anything. They made the milk in a hurry and Yang Yi brought it in. In the delivery room, the nurse had already brought Tong Tong back. The nurse also helped to raise the head of the bed so that Murphy could lay down and feed the baby. Cece was also watching curiously from the side. Her little brother closed his eyes and arched his back like a little pig. He looked so cute. Yang Yi stood behind Shishi and watched with a smile. Papa, my little brother, he's become prettier. When Shishi heard the noise and saw her father, she couldn't wait to tell him about her new discovery. After cleaning and feeling the fresh air outside, the little boy's wrinkled little face seemed to have become more plump, especially his pink skin, which made people want to take a bite. Yang Yi put his big hand on Shishi's shoulder and said with a smile, "Really? Then your little brother will be very happy to hear it. Shishi, you have to tell your little brother that you are very handsome. Boys should be handsome, not beautiful. Shishi is the beautiful one." Just now, Mo Fei heard from the nurse that Xiaowei was 7 kilograms and 53 centimeters tall. He was a white, fat, and healthy baby. Mo Fei was in a good mood, and now she was also laughing and teasing her daughter. Hee 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 hee. The little girl also laughed when she heard the last sentence. After feeding the baby, Murphy was still reluctant to let Yang Yi hold her. She was afraid that Yang Yi didn't know how to hold a newborn baby and hurt Tong Tong, so she only let him play with the little boy. Tong 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 Tong. Yang Yi reached out and gently held the little boy's small hand. The little boy's small hand was so light that it made people want to love him very much. However, at this time, little Momo had no intention of interacting with his father. He made a sound of mm and retracted his hand. Then he wriggled gently into his mother's arms. No one knew if he was looking for safety or if he was really hungry like a little pig. Yang Yi turned to Shishi and said with a smile, "Come on, Shishi, play with your little brother and let him know you. Let him know that this is my sister. She will protect me, and I will protect her when I grow up." However, Shishi shook her head. The little girl had her own understanding. She said, "No, Papa, I am the big sister. I want to protect my little brother, and then Papa will protect me. My little brother can't protect his big sister." What kind of logic was this? However, Yang Yi liked it. Yang Yi laughed and said, "Yes, Papa will protect Shishi, and Shishi will protect her little brother." Shishi was satisfied. The little girl imitated her father and reached out her little hand to her little brother. She gestured and muttered, "Papa, my little brother's hand is so small." Yes, it was so small. Such a weak little brother should be protected by his big sister. You should drink some milk to replenish your energy. Dinner will be sent here later. Yang Yi stood up, picked up the milk that had just been made, tested the temperature, and then inserted a straw into it and handed it to Murphy. He said softly. Seeing Murphy take a sip, Yang Yi felt relieved and responded to his daughter. After all, he is still young. When he grows up, his hand will become bigger. Shishi took her little brother's hand, but as if there was a feeling in the dark, Momo's left hand suddenly clenched and grabbed Shishi's slender right index finger. "Oh!" Shishi was surprised and cried out in a low voice. But she didn't withdraw her hand. Instead, she couldn't help but blink her big eyes. It was a wonderful feeling. Her little brother's little hand grabbed her finger. It was the first time that the little girl had such a feeling. She used to hold her father's finger. It was an indescribable feeling, but Shishi inexplicably liked it very much. Unknowingly, the little girl's bright eyes rippled with joy. Seeing this scene, Yang Yi couldn't help but take out his mobile phone and take a photo of his daughter and son as a souvenir. After night fell, Yang Yi asked the two elders who had spent the day with them to go home first. Dong Yue, who was satisfied, still wanted to stay and take care of Mo Fei, but in the end, she was persuaded to go back by Yang Yi. Shishi was the same. Although the little girl wanted to stay and play with her little brother, she couldn't take a bath, brush her teeth, or sleep well in the hospital. Yang Yi promised her that he would let her come over tomorrow and ask his grandparents to take her home. Yang Huan and Ding Xiang didn't have anything to do the next day, so they stayed in the hotel. They would either take over Yang Yi's shift at night or stay to take care of him. Of course, they didn't need to be there. Murphy was more responsible for taking care of him. She had to feed him every 3 to 4 hours. She also had to comfort the little guy, who would cry at any time. She also had to guide Yang Yi, who was a newbie, in changing the baby's diapers. Because of this, Murphy almost didn't have a good rest. Yang Yi did everything himself, including changing diapers and accompanying Tong Tong to get vaccinations. Why would he ask his sister or Ding Xiang to help? Although he didn't sit on the stool for the whole day, Yang Yi didn't feel sleepy at all. He was still very excited. Whenever he was free, he wouldn't sit down to rest. Instead, he would use his phone to take photos of Tong Tong and Murphy, who was exhausted. He wanted to record this happy moment. When it was almost midnight, Yang Yi carried Tong Tong back to Murphy's side. He helped Murphy up and let her feed the crying little guy. Then he sat down on the bed and accompanied Murphy. "Yeah, I was so busy that I forgot to inform your parents." Yang Yi patted his head and said apologetically, "It's fine. It's not too late to tell them now. It's still daytime over there." Murphy whispered. She was afraid that she would scare her son, who was lying on her chest. Yang Yi stuffed a pillow behind Murphy's back before he got up to call his grandfather, who was far away in the United States. "You gave birth? Is it a son or a daughter?" "A son? What does he look like? You haven't sent any photos yet? Hurry up and send the photos over." Mo Henian was pleasantly surprised on the other end of the phone. He shouted as if he was driving a cow to graze in a meadow. He was afraid that the cow couldn't hear him if he shouted too softly. The phone beeped. Yang Yi didn't know what to do with his irritable father-in-law. He smiled bitterly and shook his head at Murphy. He hurriedly sent a few photos of Tong Tong to Mo Henian through MMS. After a while, Grandpa Shen called back. However, this time, it was his mother-in-law who was talking. Zhou Mingyu smiled and told Yang Yi that his father-in-law was laughing so hard that he couldn't even speak. As a mother, she was still concerned about her daughter. Zhou Mingyu asked Yang Yi to pass the phone to Murphy. She chatted with Murphy for a long time. Murphy listened with and O. However, Yang Yi liked what Zhou Mingyu said. Murphy whispered to her mother, "Mom, don't worry. Yang Yi will take care of me." After chatting for a while, Murphy passed the phone to Yang Yi and whispered, "Dad has something to tell you." "Father-in-law's orders?" Yang Yi hurriedly took the phone. Mo Henian lectured Yang Yi for a long time, blaming him for not bringing Murphy and the children to the United States to visit them. Of course, Yang Yi had his own difficulties. Murphy was pregnant, so it was inconvenient. However, his father-in-law didn't care so much. In any case, it was Yang Yi's fault. Yang Yi didn't dare to refute and accepted the blame with a bitter smile. When the children are a little older, just this summer, she is also on summer break. Hurry up and bring the children back. Mo Henian said in an almost commanding tone. Zhou Mingyu probably couldn't stand it anymore. She snatched the phone and explained to Yang Yi politely. Of course, she also wanted Yang Yi to bring Murphy and the children back. Our family has such a big farm and such a big house. You can stay as long as you want. Don't you think so? Zhou Mingyu said with a smile. Yes. Actually, we didn't do enough. Mom, don't worry. We'll go over to visit you too every year. Yang Yi promised sincerely. It was indeed time to bring Murphy and Shishi back. After all, that was their home. Chapter 625. Murphy and her child stayed in the hospital for 3 days. On the 4th day, they were finally discharged and could go home. That evening, the Hummer SUV steadily drove into the Yang family's villa. Yang Yi jumped out of the driver's seat and opened the door for Murphy. Murphy, who was wearing thick clothes, got out of the car with Tong Tong in her arms. She gently shook his little hand and smiled. Mommy, this is your home. Mom. Daddy. You're back. Shishi's bell-like voice rang out. A small figure ran out of the door, followed by a cheerful bow bow. Of course, Shishi's big eyes were still focused on her little brother. She realized that her little brother's back was facing her, and the little girl couldn't wait to go behind her mother. Tong Tong had already opened his eyes. He looked at Shishi with a pair of sleepy and confused eyes. His big sister was making a face at him. His vision hadn't developed yet, so it was probably just a blurry shadow. However, the little guy didn't know why, but he opened his small mouth and laughed. Mom. Little brother smiled. Shishi excitedly told Murphy about her discovery. Murphy smiled and whispered in Tong Tong's ear. Big sister, this is big sister. Yang Yi was taking out the luggage from the trunk of the car when he saw Bao Bao walking around Murphy. He squatted down, patted Bao Bao's head and said, "This is your new family member. His name is Mommy, but remember, you have to protect him in the future." Bao Bao seemed to understand Yang Yi's words. He clung to Murphy's leg, stood up, and sniffed with his nose. However, Murphy had stayed outside for a long time. Dong Yue couldn't wait any longer and came out. Only then did a woman know how to be a woman. She scolded Yang Yi angrily. Tai Zi, why didn't you let your wife in? She's still in confinement. Can there be so much wind? Yang Yi hurriedly called his wife and children into the house. With the heater, the house was much warmer. Wah, wah. At night, the Yang family's villa began to play a symphony. After opening his eyes, Tong Tong seemed to know who his mother was and who his source of food was. He didn't want to leave his mother's embrace for even a moment. He didn't even want to be hugged by Yang Yi, let alone his grandparents. Yang Yi was fine. He watched from the side and teased the little fellow. But Dong Yue wanted a grandchild. She tried her best to coax Tong Tong from Murphy's arms, but the little boy could not resist. He could cry. Whenever there was a disagreement, he would use his loud and clear voice to announce his dissatisfaction. This crying made his grandmother extremely flustered, and she had no choice but to return him to his mother. Murphy smiled as she hugged Tong Tong and kissed his tender little face. After coaxing for a while, he stopped crying. There were even tears on his face. It was a bit magical. This child, even Grandma doesn't recognize him. Dong Yue said sourly. She was even jealous of her daughter-in-law. Yang Yi shook his head with a smile. At this moment, Shishi, who had already climbed upstairs, came down again. The little girl stuck her head out of the staircase and stared at her brother without blinking. Yang Yi heard the noise and turned his head to look. The little girl was discovered by her father. She was a little embarrassed and stuck out her tongue and said, "Papa, I want to play with my brother for a while." She seemed to treat Tong Tong as a real doll. She liked him so much that she couldn't wait to play with him all the time. Unfortunately, the little girl could not carry her brother, and her mother did not allow her to carry him. "Go get your clothes. Papa will bathe you. Later, Papa will have to take care of Mama and your brother. I don't have much time." Yang Yi had to stand up and carry the crying little girl upstairs. The biggest problem in bathing, she was washing her hair. The little girl's hair was very long and difficult to control. Moreover, if the angle of the head was not good, the little girl's nose and ears would be easy to get water. Therefore, Yang Yi asked her not to move or speak while washing her hair. Finally, after washing her hair, Yang Yi tied up the little girl's wet hair with a towel and wrapped it like an Indian, so that her hair would not be dirty by the foam when she took a bath later. Giggle. Shishi, who had been unable to speak for a long time, finally couldn't wait to say, "Papa, why don't you bathe my brother?" "You will bathe your brother. That's why Papa told you to bathe early. Later, Papa and Mama will bathe your brother," Yang Yi gently said to his daughter. "Why do you want Papa and Mom to bathe my brother together?" Shishi asked puzzledly. She really had 100,000 whys. However, Yang Yi was very patient. He explained to the little girl, "Because if Papa is the only one bathing him, he will cry. Mama has just given birth to your brother, so she is not feeling very well. Papa needs to take care of her and help her bathe your brother." Yang Yi carried the naked Shishi into the bathtub and gave her a bubble bath. The little girl happily held her little yellow duck and went back and forth in the bubble, while Yang Yi gently wiped her with a sponge soaked in foam. "Papa." The little girl had a problem again. She probably thought of her brother because of him. Papa, does my brother bathe in here too? No, this bathtub is too big. Do you see that bathtub? My brother baths in it. Yang smiled and pointed to the baby bathtub that was already prepared for Tong Tong. Wow, it's so small. I can't even sit in it. She twisted around in the bathtub. She felt funny and giggled. Of course you can't sit in it. People will grow up. Look, when your brother was young, he used this bathtub. When he grows up, he will have to change to a new bathtub. Do you remember when Papa bathed you in the past? He also used a bathtub. But now that you have grown up, you can't use that bathtub anymore, so I threw it away. Yang smiled. Yes. Murphy still couldn't bathe. Moreover, it was a natural birth. After a week or at least 5 days, she could take a shower. However, she could still touch water now. Yang would fetch hot water every day and wring a towel to wipe her clean. Otherwise, if her face and hands were dirty, Murphy, who liked to be clean, would be very uncomfortable. Therefore, in order to let her clingy son take a shower, Murphy also came to help. The two of them put the bathtub on the table. Murphy sat down and guided while Yang stood up. After a long time, they finally finished bathing Tong Tong. After the shower, Tong Tong smelled good. Murphy carried him and gently put him on the bed. Then Murphy wrapped him in diapers and put on baby clothes for him. She couldn't help but follow them. The little girl stuck out her little butt and supported herself with her elbows on the bed. She blinked her eyes and looked at her brother. Little Momo still didn't know how to turn her head. She could only move her black eyes when her sister stretched her head over, and then let out a little mmm sound. You should call me sister. I don't want to make sounds anymore. She corrected him. He doesn't know how to speak yet. After 8 or 9 months, you can teach him how to call you sister. Murphy couldn't help but laugh. Chapter 626. He guessed that she really wanted to treat Tong Tong as a toy. The next morning, Yang woke her up. The little girl was confused for a while. When she woke up, she muttered to her father, "Papa, where's my brother? Tong Tong is sleeping. He doesn't have the energy to get up so early." Yang whispered in his daughter's ear. She didn't notice that her father's voice was a little hoarse. In fact, it was not what Yang said. This morning at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, the little guy started to cry. Mo Fei fed him milk at about 2 o'clock in the morning, but he was woken up again just after he fell asleep. Yang also forced himself to get up and change his diapers. But she didn't know why. The little guy just refused to sleep peacefully. She couldn't even feed him milk. When Mo Fei began to doze off, the little guy began to cry again. Finally, she managed to coax him to sleep at 5 o'clock. Yang was even more tired. He couldn't go back to sleep. He had to get up and make breakfast for Shi. Although his mother and Shi could help, Yang liked to eat the breakfast made by his father. Moreover, Yang had to prepare lunch for Shi. Because he was worried about Mo Fei, Yang stopped exercising for the past few days. But before waking Cici up, he did a set of boxing to warm up. Of course, if Yang didn't say, Shi wouldn't know about her parents' hard work. The little girl rubbed her eyes, jumped out of bed, yawned and said, "Papa, I'll go and see Tong Tong." "No, you have to wash your face and brush your teeth." Yang shook his head and said, "Papa wants to take you to kindergarten." "I'll just take a look." She pouted and said coquettishly, "Just take a look at Tong Tong." It was just like how she pestered her father to watch TV, listen to a story, or play with her toys for a while. Your mother was already very tired last night. Moreover, she is mentally weak now. Any sound will disturb her sleep. Do you have the heart to disturb her sleep? Yang tried to reason with her. It's true. If you push the door open and go in, Mom will be woken up. Cici blinked her big eyes, which were still a little confused, and looked at her father. In the end, she obediently lowered her head and said regretfully, "Okay, then I won't disturb Mama. I'll come back and play with little brother." "Okay. When you come back, you can play with Tong Tong." Yang smiled and rubbed Shishi's head. Yang sent Shishi to kindergarten. The little girl had obviously spread the news that she had a little brother. Walking on the stairs of the kindergarten, Shishi ran into Yang Luoqi and couldn't wait to tell Yang Luoqi how cute her little brother was. Last night, I saw my little brother sleeping. Shishi was like a little bird singing in the morning. Her voice was pleasant as she said. Then my little brother was super cute when he was sleeping. His hand was like this, like this. The little girl clenched her little fist and showed it to Yang Luoqi. Although it wasn't a big deal, Shishi was so enraptured that Yang Luoqi listened with great interest. Uncle Yang Yi, can I go to your house and take a look at Tong Tong? Yang Luoqi let go of her little friend's hand, turned around and ran to Yang Yi. She raised her little head and looked at Yang Yi expectantly. Not now because he's still too young. Can you come later when Tong Tong is 1 month old? Yang Yi said helplessly. What's 1 month old? Shishi asked her father curiously. 1 month old. It's 1 month old after being born. Yang Yi said. It's just like how you grow up a year old. Tong Tong is 1 month old after being born. No matter what, the two little girls were still very happy. They chattered all the way into the kindergarten classroom. Yang Yi sent Shishi to the kindergarten. When he was about to leave, Teacher Mu looked for Yang Yi, a little embarrassed. It's like this, Father Yang Shi. In a month, our kindergarten will have a New Year's Day party. Just like last year, the children still have to rehearse a program. So, a few of our teachers discussed and wanted to know if you have a suitable script for the child. Teacher Mu hesitated for a moment and added, but if you're not free, it's okay. We know that you have a new child at home recently. On the second day after Tong Tong was born, Yang Yi released a micro-broadcast to announce the arrival of Earbook to the fans. At the same time, Mo Xiaowan also used the studio's official micro-broadcast to repost the micro-broadcast. She told everyone about the child's gender and Murphy's good condition, thanking the fans for their concern. Of course, this self-release was also to prevent the media from secretly following and exposing the news because they thought that it was big news. This is great news. If you're not free, we'll look for new scripts ourselves. It's just that we think that your story is very interesting and novel. Yang Yi understood what Teacher Mu meant. To be honest, Yang Yi wanted to reject it because it was very troublesome to come up with a script. Even if he had a similar story in his mind, he still needed to spend time to write it. He had to rack his brains to add dialogue for the children. And Yang Yi did not have so much energy to ponder over the script now. However, when he thought about how she would also be participating in the performance, Yang Yi could not bear to disappoint his daughter. Suddenly he had an idea. I saw that your New Year's Day party last time was not just a play, right? It seems that you can also sing and dance, Yang Yi asked. Yes. There are many forms of programs. Teacher Mu did not know what Yang Yi wanted to ask and answered honestly. Then we can choreograph a dance for the children. Yang Yi had an idea and said with a smile. You also know how to choreograph? Teacher Mu looked at Yang Yi in surprise. Yang Yi was considered a relatively famous artist, but from the reports about him, Yang Yi did not have the skills to dance, let alone choreograph. Yang Yi smiled and shook his head. I know how to write songs. It was just choreographing. Yang Yi could hire some dance teachers who specialized in choreography for the program to help design the children's movements and dances suitable for children. The most important thing was his song, which was the real soul of the program. He should let these little guys come to the studio to record the original sound, sing with their tender voices, and then dance on stage. It would definitely make everyone fall for them. Of course, Yang Yi could not describe it with words now. He had to go back and compose the song first. This was easier to handle because he had a room at home that had been renovated into a recording studio. He did not have to worry about not being able to take care of Murphy. In any case, Yang Yi agreed, and Teacher Mu was relieved. Chapter 627. As mentioned earlier, Mo Xiaowan used the studio's micro-broadcasting account to forward the news of Murphy giving birth. However, Mo Xiaowan didn't come to visit Murphy at home until the weekend. Previously, many relatives and friends from the hospital came, but Mo Xiaowan didn't appear. Of course, this wasn't because Mo Xiaowan and Murphy's relationship was strained. The two of them were still on good terms. Previously, Yang Yi arranged for Mo Xiaowan to be in charge of the auction for China Star production. The project was worth hundreds of millions. Mo Xiaowan didn't feel comfortable leaving it to others, so she brought her team to Shanghai. The process wasn't easy. China Star production was a big piece of meat after all. Not only did Mo Xiaowan set her eyes on it, but some production companies, and even some commercial television stations wanted it for themselves. Therefore, before the auction started, the competition outside the venue was especially intense. According to Mo Xiaowan and her team's initial estimates, 200 million yuan might not be enough to win the bid for the production of Zhongxing. Luckily, Yang Yi gave Mo Xiaowan her own negotiation team. These people helped her gather a lot of information about her opponents. Mo Xiaowan also changed Yang Yi's original strategy and chose to take the initiative to attack. She formed an alliance with a famous variety show production company, Xingyao Productions. Both parties agreed to invest proportionately. Under Mo Xiaojuan's name, China Star production would be auctioned off. After that, they would each take what they needed. Xingyao Productions would get the rights to the 2 shows they wanted, while Yang Yi would get the remaining production team and China Star Productions shall. Perhaps from the other party's point of view, this cooperation was profitable. After all, weren't China Star Productions' only valuable shows these 2 shows? As for the production team, Xingyao Productions didn't lack talent. In the end, their alliance allowed Mo Xiaowan to gain the upper hand in terms of capital at the auction. She won China Star Production with a total price of 30,000 yuan. And because the evaluation value of the 2 shows was higher, according to the previous agreement with Xingyao Productions, Mo Xiaowan only needed to spend 100 million to get all the talents that Yang Yi wanted under her banner. This was an amazing victory. Because she was busy with this matter, Mo Xiaowan could only give her blessings to Murphy over the phone. Almost a week later, it was already December. Mo Xiaowan returned to Jiang City, but she still rushed to the villa to visit her cousin. Yang Yi asked Yang Luoqi to come back after Tong Tong was a month old. It was not because of any taboo, but because he wanted to give Murphy a quiet environment to recuperate. If a group of children were to charge over, there would definitely be an uproar. Mo Xiaowan coming over was naturally not a problem. Tong Tong, Auntie is here to see you. Mo Xiaowan shook the rattledrum and sat on the carpet with a smile, playing with Tong Tong who was lying on the sofa. Mo Xiaowan bought some toys for the child, but she had never given birth and was a careless girl. The toys she bought, such as plastic cars and small shovels, were obviously not something that Tong Tong could play with at this age. Then again, how could a baby who could not even turn over have any toys to play with? Although the little guy could not see things that were slightly further away, he could sense the changes in the light, and could also hear movements. Therefore, when he heard the rattledrum, he could not help but stretch out his chubby little arms, spread his fingers, and bend them as if he was hugging something. Hey, look, he likes the toys I bought for him. Mo Xiaowan said happily to Yang Yi and Murphy. But how was that possible? The next second, Lil Frog opened its toothless mouth and began to cry. Murphy did not know whether to laugh or cry as she picked up the little guy and coaxed him. Oh, Auntie Xiaowan, you've scared little brother. When she saw Tong Tong crying, she ran out with a sense of justice and stood between Mo Xiaowan and Murphy. She looked at Mo Xiaowan and said, She, it's not polite to talk to your elders like that. Yang Yi reminded her. Mo Xiaowan said with a smile, It's okay. I think it's interesting that she knows how to protect her little brother at such a young age. Yang Yi thought that she was going to use her, I protect my little brother, Papa protects me excuse again. However, Shishi's attention was on the rattledrum in Mo Xiaojuan's hands. The little girl looked at it eagerly and hesitated whether she should ask Auntie Xiaowan for her little brother's toy to play with. Mo Xiaowan understood her meaning and said happily, Do you want to play with it? Then you can have it. Shishi happily took the rattledrum from Mo Xiaojuan's hands, thanked her, and could not wait to play with it. She imitated Mo Xiaowan, and twisted her wrist to make the rattledrum sound. You can't play here. You'll scare Tong Tong until he cries. Mo Xiaowan made a shushing gesture to Shishi. Shishi realized that she had forgotten about this. The little girl held the rattle drum with a smile in her eyes and ran to the side hall before stopping to play. The sound of the rattle drum attracted the attention of Steamed Bun, who was lying on the side. He got up and moved in front of Shishi. He looked at the shaking rattle drum, and his tail seemed to sway with the rhythm. Not only Steamed Bun, but the swaying of the rattle drum could also make a sound. In winter, the three fat British shorthairs who liked to stay indoors and only went out to play and bask in the sun when the sun was good were also fished out. Dodo jumped down from the cat tree. Little Gray liked to stay by the floor-to-ceiling window, and the active little Guy came out from an unknown corner. At first, the three cats were sitting in front of the rattle drum obediently, watching their little master shake the rattle drum. Meow. Little Guy could not help it. He got up and went to Shishi's feet, rubbing his body against Shishi's calf. How could Shishi not understand why this guy was acting like a spoiled child? Aya. The little girl giggled. This is not for you to play with. Steamed Bun was very loyal. Seeing that his little master was being pestered, he wagged his tail and went over. He raised his right forepaw and pressed his paw on little Guy's head. Steamed Bun was almost 10 months old. Puppies at this age were already tall and big. In Yang Yi's house, he ate and slept well and looked very strong. The size of a Steamed Bun was almost as big as 2 chubby Xiao Guai. However, Steamed Bun was touching a tiger's butt. Cats had strong self-esteem. Little Guai felt that he was offended by his little brother. He immediately turned around and bared his teeth at Steamed Bun, looking fierce as if he wanted to fight. Woo! Steamed Bun was scared. He was not brave enough. Even though he was tall, he did not dare to fight with little Guai and the others. He immediately whimpered and ran behind Dodo with his tail between his legs. He lowered his head, as if he wanted to hide with Dodo. It was like burying his head in the sand. However, little Guai was only trying to scare Steamed Bun. Seeing that Steamed Bun was scared, he proudly put away his sharp teeth and claws. For the sake of Dodo, I will spare your life. Chapter 628. After giving birth to the baby, Mo Fei still received a lot of concern from many people. She or Yang Yi's relatives and friends in the industry. Most of them, like Chen Yi, Jia Lin Muan and Ran Jin, who were far away in Harbor City, chose to call her. Only those who were closer to her, like Mo Xiaowan, Guazi, Lan Zhoukai, Wu Jingjing and Fu Jun, who came from Yang City, chose to visit her. Of course, in order not to disturb Murphy's rest, they didn't dare to stay for too long. After exchanging a few words, they left. On Sunday morning, Yang Yi and Murphy were surprised by the arrival of a guest. Niu Meiling. Although Niu Meiling showed an amiable attitude and left expensive gifts, the relationship between the two wasn't as good as it seemed. Because of Murphy's departure, Niu Meiling and Murphy almost had a falling out. Despite their relationship, Niu Meiling still came to visit Mo Fei and asked about Mo Fei's well-being affectionately. She didn't seem to be hypocritical at all, nor did she make any requests. How could this not make Murphy and Yang Yi wonder? Niu Meiling didn't stay for too long. After chatting for less than 10 minutes, she excused herself by saying that she had a meeting. After Niu Meiling left, Mo Fei looked at Yang Yi in confusion. She couldn't figure it out, so she could only hope that Yang Yi could help her figure it out. Could it be that Lingjia wants me to go back to Tianmei? Murphy asked with a frown. Mo Fei really didn't want to break up with Niu Meiling, but this didn't mean that she had let go of the dirty things she had done to Niu Meiling. She just wanted to be friends with Niu Meiling and treat her as a simple elder. Murphy didn't want to get back together. Niu Meiling wasn't a simple person. Ever since she saw Niu Meiling's true colors, Murphy had always been against her. It shouldn't be. It's not like they don't know the difference between us. You're doing well in our studio. Why would you want to go back? Yang Yi said with a smile. Also, Tianmei has trained their own singer. Their strength isn't bad. There's no reason for them to call you back. Then what's the reason? Just to see me? But I've been pregnant for so long, and Lingjia hasn't cared about me, Murphy said. In fact, Yang Yi already had a certain amount of inspiration from his own words just now. He guessed, I guess she might want to have a good relationship with us so that we can cooperate in more fields in the future. Yesterday, didn't Shawan tell you that we bought a variety show production company? Yang Yi said. I want to design a few interesting variety shows. I want to invite Zhu Jie to be the host of one of them. You know that he often participates in variety shows and has a strong sense of artistry. Yes, at that time, people in the company said that he was the company's #1 variety show. Murphy couldn't help but laugh. Well, I guess that's probably the reason. She wants to get back together with you. After all, in this world, it's always better to have one more friend than one more enemy. With her personality, she naturally knows what to do. Yang Yi shrugged and said, however, Lingjie forgot that our style of doing things is to handle things impartially. If Zhu Jie isn't suitable, no matter how good our relationship is, I won't use him. Then you don't have to care about Lingjie's relationship with me, as long as it doesn't delay your matters. Murphy nodded. In the evening, Murphy coaxed Tong Tong to sleep early. Although the little guy would wake up in a few hours, Murphy wanted to take a bath while he was asleep. According to traditional Chinese customs, women can't take a bath when they're in confinement. After Murphy gave birth, Dong Yue also reminded Yang Yi and Murphy. However, this saying was inappropriate in modern society. Women can't take a bath during confinement because technology wasn't developed in ancient times. People's living conditions were simple. If they wanted to take a bath, they had to boil hot water. It couldn't be too hot or too cold. If the temperature was suitable, it would cool down after a while. Not to mention bathing facilities, the best was to use a large bathtub sprinkled with flower petals. However, pregnant women couldn't bathe in a tub because they would be infected. All kinds of reasons led to the experience of not being able to take a bath during confinement. However, in modern society, the conditions allowed it. In winter, there was heating at home. Even the bathroom was heated. In summer, there was air conditioning at home. If they wanted to take a bath, they could use a shower. The temperature of the water could be adjusted and kept constant. After washing their hair, they could even dry it. With such good conditions, how could they not take a bath? Now Murphy was covered in a blanket all day, wearing thick clothes. Her body was sweaty and her hair was oily. She hadn't taken a bath for a week. Murphy felt that if she didn't take a bath soon, she would feel terrible. Yang Yi tried to persuade his mother several times, but the old woman couldn't understand these scientific principles. Therefore, he and Murphy decided to hide it from Dong Yue. At night, the old woman wouldn't disturb the young couple, so they would act first and report later. Of course, when Murphy went to the bathroom to take a bath, Yang Yi had to accompany her. This wasn't a bad taste. It was also for Murphy's sake. Murphy's body hadn't recovered yet. If she stood in the bathroom in the shower, what if her legs went soft and she fell? After coaxing little Momo to sleep, Mo Fei gently carried him into the crib. There was a high fence around the crib. Let alone this little guy who did not know how to turn over. Even if he grew up to know how to climb and stand, he would not be able to climb over the fence. However, what about Shi? The little girl didn't dare to stay alone in the room next door. She had been playing in her mother's room just now. Shi, come here. Yang Yi waved and called the little girl over. Sure. The little girl stretched out an index finger and pouted her little mouth to make a shushing gesture to her father. It's okay to speak softly. Yang Yi rubbed his daughter's head and pulled her to the crib. He pointed at Tong Tong and said softly, little brother is sleeping now, but daddy wants to help mommy take a bath. The little girl didn't wait for her father to finish speaking and asked in confusion, Papa, why do you want to help mom take a bath? Isn't it only children who can let Papa take a bath? Shishi's words were very ambiguous. In fact, she was emphasizing that she was a child and her mother wasn't a child. However, the little girl's words couldn't be as perfect as an adult's. Yang Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, Daddy only bathes you and little brother because you are children and don't know how to take a bath by yourself. Now the situation is special because mommy's body is still inconvenient, so daddy needs to help mommy. Afraid of his daughter's shocking words, Yang Yi quickly said, now daddy has a task for you. Okay. When the little girl heard that she had a task, she immediately puffed out her small chest and looked at her father with a smile. She was full of energy. Little brother is sleeping, but Daddy doesn't know when he will suddenly wake up. So when Daddy helps Mommy take a bath, you have to help Daddy and Mommy take care of your little brother, okay? Young-yi asked softly. Okay. She nodded vigorously and said happily. However, soon she frowned and said, But Papa, I don't know how to take care of my little brother. You just sit here and watch. Young-yi moved a stool over and let the little girl sit down. He said with a smile, If your little brother is sleeping quietly, you don't have to worry about him. Daddy and Mommy will come out soon. But if your little brother suddenly wakes up halfway, you have to see if he is crying. If he is not crying, then don't worry. If he is crying, quickly go to the bathroom and knock on the door and tell Daddy and Mommy, okay? After a series of instructions, Young-yi made sure that his daughter understood. He went to the bathroom and turned on the shower. After adjusting the temperature of the water, Murphy picked out the clothes she wanted to wear in the wardrobe and followed him. It's up to you. Before Murphy went in, she smiled and gave her daughter a thumbs up. She sat obediently in front of her little brother's crib and happily returned a bright smile to her mother. This task made the little girl feel bursting with a sense of responsibility. She thought that she must take good care of her little brother. Chapter 629. Turn your head away. Murphy walked into the bathroom and closed the door. She saw Young-yi, who had adjusted the water temperature, looking over. Through the hazy mist, his starry eyes were shining. Murphy felt a little embarrassed and couldn't help but speak up. What? Young-yi laughed. We've been married for so long. Why are you still shy? Murphy pursed her lips and her face was slightly red. She insisted and said, Turn it away. The main reason was that after giving birth, her figure hadn't recovered yet. She felt embarrassed to take off her clothes in front of Young-yi. Okay. Hurry up and take a shower. Don't catch a cold. Young-yi still felt sorry for his wife and turned his face away. After a while, Murphy said in a low voice, It's done. Young-yi looked over and saw a curvy beauty standing in the middle of the mist in the bathroom. Really, her coquettish eyes were closed shyly, and her red lips were smiling. She was prettier than the flowers, and the flowers were as delicate as the people. She looked like a mountain range from the side, and she looked like a mountain range from the side, with different heights from the distance. The chaotic flowers gradually dazzled the eyes. Murphy looked at Young-yi's burning eyes and felt happy and scared. She reminded him, What are you doing? You can't do that now. Don't think too much. She knew that Young-yi had been holding it in for so long, and it was indeed a little difficult, but he really couldn't do it. Young-yi came back to his senses, shook his head, and said with a smile, Silly, it's not like I don't know. Why would I think about that at this time? Take off your clothes and come over to take a shower. Don't catch a cold. If you catch a cold, my mother will scold me to death. Only then did Mo-fei walk over with relief. However, she hadn't taken a bath for a week, and Mo-fei also felt very uncomfortable. After she came over, she tested the water temperature, and couldn't wait to walk under the shower, and let the warm hot water pour down from her head. It was so comfortable that Murphy almost cried out. Let me wash your hair. Young-yi took the shampoo and said softly to Murphy. How do you wash it? Do I need to sit down? Murphy was a little puzzled. No need. Just stand there. Young-yi squeezed some shampoo onto his hands and rubbed them together. Then he inserted his fingers into Murphy's hair. The height difference between the two was close to 20 centimeters. After standing up straight, Murphy's head was slightly above Young-yi's chin. Although it wasn't the most comfortable height, Young-yi could still help Murphy wash her hair if he raised his hand. Murphy closed her eyes and felt Young-yi's gentle strength as he washed her hair. It was like a massage, very comfortable. He couldn't bear to use more strength for fear of hurting himself. The water from the shower head was poured over, and the warm water carried away the foam. Mo-fei's heart was also warm and happy. Daddy was helping Mommy bathe, and she was also taking care of her little brother dutifully. The little girl sat on a small chair and rested her chin on her hand, watching intently. She felt that her little brother sleeping in the crib was so cute. His little head, little hands, and feet couldn't be seen under the blanket, but they should still be small. There wasn't a lot of hair, and it was thin. She had touched it before. It was very soft and very comfortable to touch. It was even more comfortable than touching Xiao Guai and Baozi. After sleeping, her little brother's eyes narrowed into slits. Her little brother, who didn't have eyebrows or eyelashes, looked very strange but also very cute. His little face was chubby, and every inch of his skin was very tender. It was as if water could be squeezed out if one pinched it. She didn't know what interesting dream he had when he was sleeping, or maybe it wasn't a dream. Anyway, he was sleeping comfortably with the corners of his mouth slightly upturned. The arc was very small, but it was like a smile. She seemed to be in an inexplicable good mood. I really want to play with my little brother. The little girl rested her chin on her hand and muttered very softly. It was a pity that her little brother couldn't speak or move. He couldn't even react to his sister's teasing. But it was also this little brother who didn't have much resistance that made she feel the most responsible. She wanted to protect her little brother, just like how she protected Little Red Riding Hood from being eaten by the big bad wolf. However, at this time, she was thinking about something else. My little brother is so cute. Can I touch him? Just a touch, and he probably won't wake up. After hesitating for a while, she couldn't help but love her little brother. She decided to reach out her little hand. The little girl, who was sitting on a small stool, passed through the railing of the crib and gently placed her finger on Tong Tong's little hand. There was no reaction. Tong Tong's little hand was still gently clenched, just like before. Tong Tong was sleeping very soundly. His thin nostrils flapped gently as if the air he breathed in was sweet. Sleeping was the most comfortable thing in the world. She wasn't satisfied with just a touch. She got up and moved the stool closer to the crib. Then, she reached out her hand to touch Tong Tong's face. Of course, she didn't use much strength. The little girl's eyes sparkled with excitement, but her movements were very gentle. It was as if she was hugging her favorite doll. Her little hand gently touched Tong Tong's side face. Because of his baby fat, Tong Tong's cheeks were bulging. She could feel the smoothness and coldness of his skin when she touched it. Little brother, I'm your big sister. The little girl muttered softly. Of course, Tong Tong didn't react. He was sleeping comfortably. This little movement didn't affect him much. It was better to stop while she was ahead. She reluctantly withdrew her little hand. Her little brother's face was very interesting. However, she felt that she had secretly done something naughty. The little girl's heart was in a mess. She secretly glanced at the bathroom. She was worried that her father would see it. After an unknown period of time, under Cece's attentive gaze, Xiaopai grunted twice and waved its right hand twice in the air. Ah, is little brother going to wake up? She panicked. Tong Tong was indeed cute when he was asleep, but Tong Tong might not be cute when he woke up. She was also a little afraid that Tong Tong wouldn't stop crying. She couldn't coax him no matter how hard she tried. Moreover, when her little brother woke up, would he tell their parents that his big sister had touched him while he was sleeping? She was so worried that she forgot that her little brother couldn't speak yet. Tong Tong kicked his feet gently. His nose and mouth were making noises. However, what attracted Shishi's attention was Tong Tong's little hand. It was moving unconsciously as if he was looking for something. Shishi didn't think too much about it. The little girl subconsciously reached out her little hand to let her little brother touch it. Tong Tong touched his big sister's hand. His little hand directly grabbed his big sister's thumb and refused to let go. However, perhaps because he found Nuanyuan to rely on, Tong Tong's movements slowly slowed down. The sounds he made earlier also stopped, and he fell into a deep sleep again. A little brother is holding my hand. What should I do? The little girl wasn't too happy because this posture of bending over was actually very uncomfortable. However, Shishi was afraid that if she retracted her hand, her little brother would wake up and cry again. Cece leaned forward awkwardly, allowing her brother to hold her hand all the time. It was very difficult for the little girl. Fortunately, after a while, Yang Yi came out with Murphy, who was wrapped in a bathrobe. He helped Murphy back to the bed and covered her with the blanket to keep her warm. Then he saw Shishi's appearance. How did your little brother catch you? Yang Yi found it funny and couldn't help teasing his daughter. No, it's not like that. Little brother, he's about to wake up. Then he took my hand and went back to sleep. The little girl pouted and explained to her father softly. Was there such a story? Yang Yi was a little surprised. He rescued Shishi and smiled as he rubbed the little girl's head and said, so that's what happened. Shishi, you've worked hard. Not only did you take care of your little brother, but you also coaxed him to sleep and didn't wake up to disturb your parents. Good job. The little girl was praised by her father. She smiled happily and felt a sense of accomplishment. Let's go. You go to the room and wait for your father. Now I'm going to make some milk for your mother to drink. Later, I'll accompany you to read a book for a while before going to sleep. Shishi was coaxed back to the master bedroom by Yang Yi. Even so, the little girl was still a little reluctant. She still wanted to play with her little brother. Moreover, she still had a lot of insights from her observation of her little brother that she hadn't shared with her parents. After Shishi left, Murphy couldn't help but remind Yang Yi with a smile. Do you want to change mommy's diapers? What Shishi said just now should be mommy peeing or defecating. Shishi didn't understand, and Yang Yi didn't have any experience, but Murphy knew. Yang Yi untied the diapers. Sure enough, the little guy pooped. A yellow piece was absorbed by the diapers. He had to change his diapers again. Chapter 630. December 13th, Wednesday. It was a gloomy winter day. There was no rain, but the clouds were so thick that the sun could not be seen. The temperature in River City during the day was as low as 2 or 3 degrees. On the road to River City Media University, Yang Huan wrapped her coat tightly around her after class and hurried past. The cold, damp air was blowing into her neck along with the wind. Even though Yang Huan's physique was not bad, she was still shivering. She wanted to go back to the coffee shop as soon as possible to avoid the cold. However, on the way, the phone in her pocket suddenly rang. Who is it? Why is he calling at this time? Yang Huan grumbled in her heart, but she still picked up the phone. Seeing the caller ID, Yang Huan hurriedly stopped complaining and became spirited. It was a call from the crew of Drawing Sword. They had promised to inform her if there was any news, but there was no news after half a month. Yang Huan thought she was done for. However, Yang Huan did not expect them to call. What could be the reason? Yang Huan quickly ran to a big tree by the roadside and used the trunk to avoid the wind blades. She then quickly picked up the phone. To Yang Huan's surprise, it was Chen Fengchen himself who called. Director Chen, you. Yang Huan was so nervous that she did not know what to say. It was possible that she was shivering from the cold. Congratulations, Yang Huan. We've finally decided to give you the role of Xiuqin. Chen Fengchen was much more polite as he calmly told Yang Huan the news. Really? No, I mean thank you, Director Chen. Thank you. Yang Huan's eyes widened after hearing that. She spoke incoherently while her heart was boiling with excitement. It did not seem as cold as before. You don't have to thank me. You did well in the audition and moved me and the others, Chen Fengchen said in a deep voice. Chen Fengchen did not want to choose Yang Huan, but after 2 rounds of auditions, including the day of Yang Huan's audition and the subsequent round of auditions, many of the actors recommended by the agency did not satisfy Chen Fengchen. It was not that the other actors were not good at acting. They were just small supporting roles, and the emotions they had to express were not particularly complicated. But, with Yang Huan leading the way, Chen Fengchen felt that no matter how good the other actors were, their performances would still be a little lacking. Perhaps some of them lacked the rustic vibe that Chen Fengchen wanted to see. Actors with rustic vibes didn't have Yang Huan's gentleness and toughness. So in order to film the drama well, Chen Fengchen finally chose Yang Huan. Of course, Chen Fengchen didn't tell Yang Huan these details. He paused and asked, "Do you want to tell your brother about this? Are you going to say it, or should I?" Yang Huan hesitated for a while and asked in a low voice, "Director, can we not talk about it first? I want to give him a surprise after the performance." After seeing how happy Yang Yi was at home taking care of his little nephew, Yang Huan suddenly felt that it was too childish for her to show off in front of him that she had gotten a role in his novel. Why did he have to show off? Yang Huan felt that after she played the role well, Yang Yi could see the results of her acting and be happy with her progress. That would be more interesting. However, Chen Fengchen said to Yang Huan over the phone, "Okay, that's the best. We didn't want to reveal too much about you, the actress playing Xiuqin, for the time being. We need to use it for publicity in the future." Although Chen Fengchen was old, he was not as old-fashioned as Yang Yi and Murphy. He felt that some things could be hyped up. As long as it was not deliberate and could increase the popularity of the film, it was possible to make use of it. Yang Huan didn't think too much about it. After receiving Chen Fengchen's message, she was already wild with joy. After hanging up the phone, Yang Huan excitedly put away her phone and ran down the school path without caring about her image. After a while, Yang Huan and Ding Xiang's excited cheers could be heard from the coffee shop at the corner of the street behind the school. After half a month of confinement, Mo Fei's condition had improved a lot. Little Momo also had enough to eat and sleep. He was comfortable in the warm home. Except for sometimes tormenting his parents at night, his situation was basically smooth. Yang Yi saw that there were no big problems today. Moreover, his parents and Yang Qing were taking care of Murphy and Tong Tong at home. Therefore, he took a day off to inspect his two companies and confirm the amount of the year-end bonus to stabilize the morale of his employees. Backwave Technology Company was doing well. Currently, it was operating micro-broadcasting with all its strength. Gradually, it had established micro-broadcasting as a platform for everyone to speak up in the internet era. Mao Peifu was currently leading the second Weibo Cup micro-movie competition. This time, the finals of the competition would be held at Beijing Film Academy. There were many interpersonal issues that she needed to deal with. Other than talking to the person in charge of micro-broadcasting, Yang Yi also looked for Mao Peifu to listen to her work report. Yang Yi also told Mao Peifu that he was going to send her to the United States to work on the international version of Facebook. This project would be fully managed by Mao Peifu. Of course, Mao Peifu still had half a year to go before she graduated. She could use this half a year to continue working on the micro-movie competition and have plenty of time to prepare for her trip to the United States. After leaving Backwave Technology Company, Yang Yi went to Sahara Publishing House. It was mainly Lu Benji who reported to Yang Yi. Yang Yi did not have to worry about Sahara Publishing House. All the work was carried out in an orderly manner. There were no setbacks, but there were no improvements either. Lu Benji told Yang Yi a piece of good news. Wolf TV station had announced that Prison Break had started filming. The filming location was an abandoned prison in California. In order to film this show, the prison had been redesigned and renovated. Based on Yang Yi's character settings, Paul Yi, who was Yi Shuihan, quickly selected the actors and actresses. The efficiency of the crew's preparation was obviously a level higher than Old Master Chen's. Of course, this was also because most of the actors in the United States were gathered in California. They'll start filming the day after tomorrow. The first episode will probably be released at this time next January. Lu Benji said excitedly to Yang Yi. The United States had a production model of airing one episode after another. At most, they would film 2 more episodes in advance. They would not film an entire season of the show at once or film dozens of episodes before airing. This was beneficial for market regulation. The TV station could choose the life and death of a show based on the ratings at any time. At most, they would renew the contract with the crew season by season. They would not lose too much money, and it would be convenient for them to recoup their funds. Therefore, the broadcast of Prison Break would not necessarily be later than the broadcast of Soldier Assault, which had already been filmed. This is good news, but I want to talk to you about the development of Sahara Publishing House in the future. I think that in addition to operating my own literary works, Sahara Publishing House should also have its own unique development goal. Yang Yi said to Lu Benji with a smile. But boss, didn't we think for a long time before and didn't have a good idea? Although Lu Benji asked in confusion, his hands were not slow. He quickly took out his notebook. It was easier said than done to create its own unique feature. I didn't think of it before, but now I have an idea. Yang Yi said. If it wasn't for the fact that the child was just born and I couldn't get away, I would have told you half a month ago. Chapter 631. Regarding the development of Sahara Publishing House, Yang Yi also came up with the idea from Shishi's children's books. Although he could write some good stories for Shishi, they were still too long and would not be easy for children to read. Moreover, with his own efforts, he could not change the current situation of the lack of children's books in China. Old Lu, do you know who writes fairy tales for children overseas? Yang Yi asked Lu Benji. Lu Benji shook his head. He originally did not know much about children's literature. It was only in the past 1 or 2 years that Lu Benji got involved in this field when Yang Yi published fairy tales. However, if he were to talk about the situation of children's literature in China, he would be at a loss if he were to talk about children's literature abroad. In foreign countries, most of the people who write fairy tales for children are young parents, not professional children's literature writers. Yang Yi said. This was true. Take the classic Swedish children's literature works, Pippi Longstocking, Emil the Naughty Boy for example. When their author, Granny Lindgren, wrote Pippi Longstocking, it was inspired when she told stories to her 6-7-year-old daughter, Karen. Note 1. When J.K. Rowling wrote Harry Potter, although she did not get the creative inspiration from telling stories to her daughter, Jessica, she often brought Jessica along when she wrote in the cafes in Edinburgh. On the title page of Sorcerer's Stone, Rowling also wrote, I dedicate this book to Jessica. She likes this story. The vast group of parents are also the creators with the most potential in the field of children's literature. They have their own children. In the process of interacting with their children and racking their brains to tell stories to their children, there are actually many wonderful bursts of inspiration. Yang Yi said to Lu Benji, it's just that very few people think of expanding these fragmented inspirations and publishing them into books. Lu Benji understood and asked, you mean we should look for this type of author? Yes, we should not only look for them, but also support them and give them creative support. Especially those mothers who have the ability to write, but are worried that they won't be able to earn money from writing. We should give them some confidence in the early stages of writing. Yang Yi said. After that, Yang Yi talked to Lu Benji about his idea of setting up a children's book creation fund. With a non-adult perspective as the basic benchmark, he encouraged young parents or authors who had yet to find a direction to create children's books for children aged 0 to 8 years old. Based on their outline and the content of the first 3 chapters of the story, they can apply for creative funding from our fund. For example, there was a mother who wanted to earn some money for milk powder for her children. She had a good story and promised to write it into a book and authorize our Sahara Publishing House to publish it. Depending on how good the story was, we would give her a subsidy of 5,000 to 50,000 yuan. Of course, the distribution of the book sales can be carried out according to our normal contract. We won't deprive the other party of the benefits they deserve, Yang Yi said to Lu Benji. We should also give her a limited time to write. She can't just take the money and not write it, Lu Benji said. You can discuss and perfect these details later. Yang Yi nodded, smiled and said, I'll invest 10 million yuan as the first installment of funds. When it's used up later, I'll replenish it according to the situation. Lu Benji nodded excitedly. Yang Yi's words had indeed pointed him in the right direction. If it was really as Yang Yi said, it could stimulate the creative desire of the majority of parents and change the status quo in the field of children's literature. Then, even if Sahara Publishing House could not become the leader of the publishing house, it could still become a benchmark in the field of children's literature publishing. One more thing. I want the publishing house to add a picture book department and recruit a group of comic artists with high salaries. We don't need people who have the ability to create their own comics. We don't need cartoonists who can produce their own comic books. These people, especially those who have drawn children's comics, are the ones we want to recruit, Yang Yi said to Lu Benji. You want them to draw children's books? Lu Benji suddenly understood Yang Yi's idea. That's right. Yang Yi snapped his fingers and smiled. In the early days, their task was to draw different stories according to my previous children's books and make small picture books suitable for children of a younger age. Of course, it was not a problem for Yang Yi to draw, but where would he have the time to draw and color the drafts one by one? There was a professional team with experience in drawing comics to help with the design of the shots, the distribution of the plot of each drawing, and the final draft of the drawing. Yang Yi only needed to design the prototype of the characters. This was much simpler, and the progress of the book would be much faster. Lu Benji nodded as he recorded. Later, they will also communicate with the children's book authors we support, and be responsible for drawing illustrations for them, and even the subsequent adaptation of the picture book, Yang Yi said. This will form a complete industry chain. Lu Benji clenched his fists and said excitedly, the picture books we publish are suitable for children between the ages of 0 to 6. They can read these picture books with a small amount of words, and a large amount of colorful pictures in the company of their parents. As for literature with more words and fewer pictures, it can be provided for older children to read after they become literate. Yang Yi's idea was indeed so. Of course, he would earn less money in the process because he had invested a lot of support funds in the early days to support a large number of authors with ideas. Most of the authors' works would not sell for much money, and Yang Yi might even lose money. After all, the market competition was very fierce. He did not set up this fund for the purpose of exploiting the interests of the authors. Even if it was an adaptation of a picture book, most of the money earned would be distributed to the original authors and the artists in the comics department. But even if it did not earn much money, it was still meaningful. Yang Yi's children, Xixi and Chen, would have more exciting stories to listen to and more interesting picture books to read in the future. Yang Yi was only responsible for providing ideas and funds. The rest of the actual operation was, of course, left to Lu Benji and the people in the publishing house. After leaving Sahara Publishing House, Yang Yi went to the coffee shop. Yang Huan happened to have no classes in the afternoon, so she helped Ding Xiang in the coffee shop. Ah, brother, why are you here? Seeing Yang Yi suddenly appear, Yang Huan, who had a guilty conscience, was shocked and said guiltily, I can't come? Yang Yi asked with a smile. Don't tell me you have a secret boyfriend and don't dare to let me know? Yang Yi was still teasing Yang Huan. He deliberately turned to Ding Xiang and said, Ding Xiang, tell me which daring brat is it? I'll break his legs. Ding Xiang covered her mouth and laughed, not saying a word. Yang Huan rolled her eyes. But at this time, she felt guilty and did not have the courage to talk back. She just said with a smile, Why would I have a secret boyfriend? My ideal boyfriend is an indomitable hero. I don't even know where he is now. Hearing Yang Huan's words, Yang Yi thought of the classic dialogue in A Chinese Odyssey. He wanted to say, Do you want him to wear golden armor and walk on colorful clouds to marry you? Of course, Yang Yi did not say it. He just shook his head and patted Yang Huan's head, saying, I have something to do today, so I stopped by the coffee shop. Let me tell you, tomorrow is the winter solstice. Remember to come home early if you don't have classes. Mom and Dad said that it's a rare opportunity for the whole family to celebrate the winter solstice together, so we have to come home for dinner. Winter solstice. Is Mom going to make pumpkin pies again? Yang Huan said excitedly. Mom's pumpkin pies are the best. In the past we always had food. Yang Yi said with a smile. Oh, Ding Xiang, if you don't have anything to do, come with Huan Huan. Yang Yi turned to Ding Xiang and said. Ding Xiang was stunned. She waved her hand and said, It's okay. I have classes tomorrow. Actually, Ding Xiang did not want to disturb Yang Yi's family dinner. After all, she was an outsider. How could she have the nerve to ask for a free meal during the festival? Yang Huan tried to persuade Ding Xiang for a while, but Ding Xiang did not agree. Okay, I'll bring you pumpkin pies tomorrow night, Yang Huan said regretfully. Let me tell you, my mom's pumpkin pies are delicious. You have to stay home with Mom and Dad tomorrow night. You can go home the day after tomorrow morning. Yang Yi smiled. But it's okay. Not to mention pumpkin pies, I'll leave you a portion of other delicious food. I'll bring it back the day after tomorrow to eat with Ding Xiang. Chapter 632. In his previous life, Yang Yi didn't know the importance of the winter solstice to the Chinese people. Many people living in the city didn't know about this festival, and only treated it as a solar term. But in fact, this festival had a long history. It wasn't as simple as a solar term. During the Zhou and Qin dynasties, the winter solstice was still the spring festival. Important activities such as ancestral worship or family gatherings were often held on the winter solstice. Even after the winter solstice and the first lunar month were separated, people still celebrated the winter solstice as a small new year. During the Tang and Song dynasties, or similar dynasties in this world, this festival was also a day of worship to the heavens and ancestors. For the emperor, it was a day of worship to the heavens and ancestors. For ordinary people, it was a day of worship to their parents and elders. Not to mention the similar history of the two worlds, Yang Chonggui and Dong Yue attached great importance to this festival. Early in the morning, Dong Yue brought Zheng Shuyi and Yang Yi and asked Yang Yi to lead the way and send her to the market to buy various ingredients, including flour, glutinous rice flour and sticky rice flour for making noodles, pumpkin pies and dumplings. According to the customs of Yang Yi's hometown, the winter solstice was to eat noodles and pumpkin pies. But Murphy said she wanted to eat dumplings, so this small wish naturally had to be fulfilled. Yang Yi also asked Yang Chonggui to prepare incense and candles early in the morning and wait for them to come back from shopping. At around 10 o'clock in the morning, the three men went south to worship their ancestors. Yang Chonggui even muttered that he wanted to tell the ancestors about Yang Yi's birth and name, hoping that the ancestors would bless the child to grow up healthily and happily. It was a little superstitious, but the meaning was good, wasn't it? The busiest time was near noon. Everyone sat around the dining table in the dining room, making pumpkin pies and making dumplings together. In order to let Shishi experience the atmosphere of a traditional Chinese festival, Yang Yi even asked for leave for her. So when everyone gathered around the dining table, the little girl also came over curiously. Her big eyes looked at her father for a while, then looked at her grandmother for a while. Shishi, where's mommy? Why aren't you with mommy? Isn't it boring for mom to be alone? Yang Yi asked Sisi with a smile. The little girl was watching her grandmother crush the steamed pumpkin into pumpkin puree with a spoon. She answered her father absent-mindedly, Mom, where's mom? Mama is here. Mo Fei walked out of the living room with little Momo in her arms and a smile on her face. At this moment, Shishi came to her senses. Inexplicably, she felt that it was interesting. She giggled and pointed to her mother. Yes, Mom is here. Why are you here? It's a mess here. Yang Yi was worried that Murphy would feel uncomfortable after standing for a long time, so he quickly wiped off the flour on his hands and moved a chair for her. He also brought a warm cushion from the living room for her to sit on. You also said that I was bored, so I came here to sit with everyone. Although I can't help much, Mommy and I can show our support for you. Murphy sat down with a smile. She gently held Tong Tong's soft hands and said in a fake whisper, Come on, come on. Dong Yue saw this scene and smiled so widely that her eyes narrowed into slits. If Tong Tong knew how to say it himself, Grandma might be happier. Of course, Tong Tong still didn't know how to say Lulu, cough baby. So he could only respond to some of his mother's sounds. For example, the corners of his mouth lifted slightly. Nobody knew if it meant that he was happy. Zheng Shuyi looked at the interaction between mother and son enviously. She was probably thinking that she and Yang Qing would have a baby soon. But she wasn't pregnant yet. The adults talked and laughed, but Shishi was more concerned about what they were doing. After walking around, the little girl finally returned to her father's side and watched him knead the dough. Do you want to knead the dough with Daddy? When the time comes, we'll eat dumplings made with this dough. Yang Yi said softly when he saw that she was very interested. Okay. Shishi nodded happily and answered crisply. The dough was almost done with Yang Yi's kneading. It was no longer sticky and soft like before. Instead, it was very smooth. Shishi pressed her little finger on it and felt cool and soft. In order to let the little girl reach it, Yang Yi made her stand on a small chair. Shishi turned her head and looked up slightly. She said to her father in amazement, It's like plasticine. Yang Yi smiled and said, There's still a little difference. The plasticine is softer, and this dough is harder. Come, you and Daddy do this. Use your palms to press it. Yang Yi taught her how to knead the dough. Of course, with the little girl's current strength, she still couldn't handle such a large piece of dough. Shishi used all her strength and could only press the dough down a little. However, She left her palm print on it. She didn't feel particularly frustrated. Instead, she was overjoyed as if she had discovered a new continent. She pointed at her palm print and said to her father, "Papa, look." "Not bad, continue." Yang Yi encouraged the little girl. He took over and finished kneading the dough. Then he put down the dough and continued to let Shishi play. After a while, the little girl who was never tired of playing didn't even know when her face was stained with flour. Of course, the little girl's face was stained with flour as if it was a blood-stained style. It also announced that she was working hard to help and didn't slack off. "Mommy, look at sister. She's so awesome." Murphy saw it and happily picked up Tong Tong. She supported his butt with one hand and held his body with the other hand and said, "Of course, Mommy didn't understand anything and probably couldn't see her sister who was so far away." She still looked confused. However, Shishi reacted positively. She turned around excitedly, grabbed her father's clothes and waved to Mommy. "Brother, do you want to help too?" Yang Yi looked down at his clothes, which were stained with flour by Shishi's little hands. He felt a little helpless. However, Murphy and Shishi were very happy. Murphy imitated the tone of a child and said in a fake voice, "I'm sorry, sister. I'm still very young and can't help." Not only Shishi, but also the adults were amused. "Wait a minute. I'll get a camera and take some pictures," Yang Yi couldn't help but say. He hurriedly ran to the study and took a camera and a tripod. He first took a few photos of Cece kneading the dough, as well as a smiling face of the little girl with flour on her face. Then, Yang Yi set up the tripod, arranged the position, chose the angle, set the camera, and set the delay time. He said, "Let's take a picture together." With the click of the camera, the whole family sat together with smiles on their faces, and prepared the food for the winter solstice together. Murphy and Tong Tong were also in the picture. However, in the last picture, Tong Tong was frightened by everyone's shouting eggplant, and opened his mouth to cry. These pictures were quite interesting and heartwarming. However, after the picture was taken, they suddenly remembered. There was also Yang Huan. "When will Huan Huan come back?" Zheng Shuyi asked with a smile. Before her voice died away, Yang Yi's phone rang. It was Yang Huan. "Brother, I'm at the door. Call the security guard and ask him to let me in," Yang Huan said, not knowing what was going on. "Huan Huan, come quickly. We're all waiting for you." Zheng Shuyi smiled and shouted at Yang Huan from a few meters away. "Little auntie, hurry up and come." Cece also giggled and shouted along with her aunt. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.